So we're recording this now. Okay. Okay, so this is the agenda for today. It's a pretty packed program, but we've allowed a couple of breaks because I know that at least my tolerance for looking at a computer screen non-stop for a long time is somewhat limited. But we're going to start off the morning session really describing TAPAS, and then after a break for lunch, we'll be hearing from some of our partners. And then we'll have a further session at the end where we really want to try and get some feedback from you about how we will proceed, and in particular working with partners, but other issues about the project as a whole. And at that point, we're going to put you randomly into breakout sessions. And what we will ask is that one person to take notes of what you discuss, or your responses to these questions, and email them to Sophie at the end. Okay, so so that's our program for today, and I'm going to stop sharing just for a second, and just to say that I'll begin by first of all introducing myself. I don't know everybody on this call, and we're very pleased to see that we have over 50 people, which is excellent. So I'll introduce myself. So I'm Paul Linden. I'm a professor in Cambridge in the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics. And my expertise relevant to this particular project is that I work on airflow in buildings. And I've done so for quite a long time, starting off being interested in the questions about how you make buildings more efficient from an energy perspective, and more recently become much more involved with internal airflows and the impacts of how various pollutants move around within inside buildings. And over the last 6 months, I've been quite heavily involved in working on this aspect related to COVID, how airborne transmission might occur as a result. And this is obviously related to the motion of other airborne quantities within inside buildings. So, as I said, I'm the PI on this project. We have a large number of co-investigators representing about 8 different universities across the UK, and we have a large number of partners too, some of which will be introduced later on today. I'd like also to introduce Sophie Bristow, who is our network manager, and Sophie is going to put her camera on, I hope, in a second. And if you speak, Sophie, then you'll appear at the top. So Sophie has been working with me in Cambridge on another project called Magic, which has been about, again, the interaction of airflow inside and outside, but with a view very much focused around saving energy in urban situations. And you'll have all received lots of emails already from Sophie, and Sophie's been responsible for putting together the program for this meeting. So this is to put a face to a name, and also to say at the beginning to thank her for all her hard work in putting together what I think will be a fascinating program for today. So let me say a little bit about TAPAS, and before going on to the details of the project. As you will know, there was a call by the Natural Environment Research Council for networks to work on air pollution and air quality at the indoor-outdoor interface. And this was also meant to include some vulnerable group in society. And we decided in our project that we would like to focus on children as a vulnerable group for a number of reasons. Obviously, they're physically vulnerable as they grow into adulthood, and there's increasing evidence that exposure to air pollution has a very adverse effect on children in terms of their health, and increasingly thoughts about cognitive ability and other things. And I think we were also very motivated by the idea that we would be able to educate and encourage children to become more aware of their environment, generally speaking, with a view that as they grow and mature, they'll carry this message on through their life and perhaps bring around a significant change in the way we all behave as a result of knowing what's around us and having the agency to act on that. And it's very much an open network, so we would hope that that if you know of other people that you think might want to get involved, we would welcome them, and we will welcome anybody who wants to join. We have a web page set up, which will evolve, of course, over the course of the project, and I'm hoping that we'll build a very vibrant and extensive network over the next 3 years. As I said, there were 6 networks funded in total, and I know that we have at least some of the investigators from some of the other networks on this call, and so welcome to you. It's very nice to have you along, and one of the things that will happen over the course of this project is that there'll be coordination across these 6 networks. And so that will be, this is the beginning, I hope. Well, we did have a short meeting a couple of weeks ago, but I hope that this will be the beginning of useful interactions across the whole of these different networks. And what I'd like to get out of this meeting is, as I said, to give you an introduction to the project and to hear from the partner organizations. Both they'll, I hope, tell us something of what they do so we can learn more, but also what they would like from the network. How can we help them do what they do, and how can we perhaps add to that? And this is something that I'd like to see discussed when we get to the final session today. And we'd also like to discuss the mechanics of how we might work with partners and what our future plans are. So this is what the goal of this meeting is today. I'm going to first of all give you just a very brief kind of overview of the structure, and then I'm going to hand over to some of my investigators here to talk about other aspects. So I need to put this into presentation mode, I think. So you should be able to see a single slide. Can someone say that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. Okay. So this is a structure of the project. As I said, we want to develop a research base so that the environment in schools is healthy for children and for teachers, of course. And we have already identified a series of goals that we hope will help develop this research base. So we want to understand the school estate, the range of sort of building types and issues that occur. We want to build on some existing initiatives, and you'll hear from about this later on from the Global Action Plan. We want to identify gaps in our knowledge, and obviously, in a way, try and pinpoint those which are important. As I said, we're not just thinking about building efficiency, but we're actually very concerned about personal exposure to pollutants. And this also then, of course, I think given the current pandemic, it's hard to avoid the fact that we also are concerned about disease transmission, and we want to build a community. As I said, it needs to be an open community. So we will work with schools, and we have a small amount of money for some small research projects, which we will be selecting from within this network over the course of the project. The first group will probably have a first call for proposals in the spring. The way we're operating is that we have divided ourselves up into 4 focus areas. As you can see here, one on the problems in schools, one trying to identify a range of solutions, the third to prioritize those, and then of course to involve the schools themselves in dissemination and participation, and as I said, education. And all of this will be done, we hope, working with partners. So there'll be opportunities for partners either to work with particular focus areas, depending on how you see yourselves fitting in, or across the network more broadly. And we'll use all of this to produce outreach into the community in various ways, we hope through educational initiatives, through our web presence, and we're planning to hold a series of workshops which will provide information and outreach to the general public and other communities. So that's the structure of the project, and what's going to happen now is that the lead investigators on the 4 focus areas will give us a short introduction to them, but I hope this gives you a plan of how we're going to bring this all together here. So with that, I will stop sharing, and I will see if there's anybody in the waiting room. Let me look. No, that looks all right. Okay, so the first person to talk is Megan Davies-Wykes, who's going to talk about focus area 1. So I'm going to hand over to her and go for it, Megan.
Yeah, I have a slide. It'd be useful I could share screen. You have to click security. Oh, there we go. Okay. So as Paul said, I'm like the co-lead of focus area 1. Just to check, everyone can see my slide and hear my voice.
Yep, looks good.
Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so focus area 1 is all about understanding the current problem in schools. So the first kind of phase of this will be as a focus area group, we'll do some initial review of the kind of current state of affairs. This is partly because different members of our group have different areas of expertise. So for example, kind of more on the health side, we have expertise on the more education side of things, and then Paul and I are more have backgrounds in kind of airflow, ventilation, outdoor pollution. And the plan is to use this initial review stage to kind of identify speakers and participants for a workshop during the kind of January-March time, which will be online. And this will be kind of a good way, we thought, of bringing together kind of the community, and particularly different communities that will be needed to interact to kind of solve this kind of problem. And then our kind of tentative plan after that is to use the results of the workshop to compile a review or a kind of comment paper on what kind of state of affairs are at the moment. And we've identified some questions which boil down essentially to these 3 questions I've got on the slide, which is firstly, like, how does pollution affect children's learning and health? What are the sources and transport routes of the most important pollutants identified in question 1? And what the existing measurements are there in schools? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Does anybody have any questions for Megan? You can either raise your hand or write something in the chat, or for me, actually, if you wanted to ask me something from mine. I don't see anybody having done that. So in which case, we'll move on to focus area 2, which is you, Nick. And please introduce yourself. I think that would be good too.
Okay, I'm just sharing my screen. I'm not sure if I can multitask and introduce myself at the same time. Hang on. Right, yeah, so I'm Nick Carslaw. I work at University of York, and my background is as an atmospheric chemist, but more latterly I've been working on indoor air chemistry. So along with Alan Short, I'm heading up FA2. I'll just make that full screen. So we are looking at understanding the potential solutions and thinking about interventions and covering areas such as design, technology and policy. And basically what we want to do is consider some of the possible solutions to improving indoor air quality in schools, and some of those are listed here. So things like building design, retrofit, ventilation systems, external interventions such as traffic interventions outside schools, so things like school streets, how we use green and blue spaces around schools, thinking about the behavioural aspects, so how people use buildings and obviously particularly focusing on schools. Some of these democratised products that control the environment, so various intelligent devices, predictive models that can be accessed by schools and are easy to use. Things about managing travel to and from school, and then public policy interventions. And I guess it's thinking about the kind of payoff between the interventions and the cost and the risk to health. So this paper was looking at some of those things and thinking about how you control infectious airborne disease transmission in indoor environments. So not schools particularly, they're looking at an office, but it's similar sort of principles. So you can see here this black line is showing what happens when you use increasingly stringent particle filtration systems. So you can see that as you do that, so going down in this direction, these filters are getting more and more efficient, but you get to a point where you don't really reduce the risk anymore, but you do significantly increase the cost. And then this is obviously a mechanical ventilation system, and these lines here for different offices in America. These are what you would have to do in terms of natural ventilation to achieve the same filtration efficiencies. And you can see that the cost here is significantly higher. So the interventions that we design need to take into account things like efficiency of the intervention measure, how it reduces our risk to exposure to pollution, or how it reduces the risk of children's exposure to pollution against the cost. So one thing that Public Health England did was to try and think about interventions and how they could improve outdoor air quality. And I think this might be quite useful when we come to design our indoor plan. And the air pollution intervention hierarchy basically talks about preventing as being most important, mitigating as second most, and then avoiding as the kind of third strand of that. And what they had in there was a figure that tried to show one way of thinking about intervention. So they had something called an intervention hierarchy and a net health gain at the end of it. So you can see that you start off with these kind of health impacts, and then through thinking about ways that you can prevent some of those emissions happening at all. So that would be a wider thing than just what was going on in the school, maybe preventing all traffic from outside the school. For instance, you could reduce a significant amount of those health impacts. And then if you can start to mitigate against some of the health impacts, you can reduce a bit more, and then you can avoid some as well. So you end up defining an overall, somewhere where you have overall health benefits, and hopefully we can adopt something similar for our indoor air quality in schools process. And again, what PHE came up with was a list of interventions, and obviously these are for outdoors, but it's just showing as an example of what we could do for indoors. And they had various interventions in these different sectors and strength of evidence for each of those actually being effective. So again, we will aim to provide something similar for indoor air quality in schools. And then that will pass on to the next focus group, who will be trying to rank the effectiveness and judge some of these intervention measures. So ongoing activities in our group. So we've started off by splitting the interventions into external and external activities. So internal are things like what you can do about school buildings, maybe the materials used, the furnishings. External will be more about thinking about traffic outside schools. So we have subgroups that will review the material available in those different sectors, report back at group meetings. We're having those once a month. Alan Short is an expert on school buildings. He's in this focus group, and he's going to do a kind of review of school buildings, because we realised when we had a group leads meeting a couple of weeks ago that we actually don't know too much about the school estate in terms of how many children are being taught in Victorian classrooms, how many are in porter cabins every day. So I think at the start of this, it would be really good just to have a review of the estate. We'll be looking to identify partners to help us with this work. And then, a bit like Megan said, for the first focus group, we'll be working towards some sort of review paper and a workshop next year where we can try and get some of our stakeholders involved in some of the activities. The other important thing for us is going to be thinking about links to the focus group 3. So this has been pointed out by Mike Holland, who'll probably talk about this in a minute, is trying to think what is the intervention we are aiming at. So are we going to suggest to schools that they have different conditions such as temperature, humidity indoors? Are we going to be making recommendations around ventilation rates? Are we going to be talking about pollutant levels? And this is going to be really important when it comes to the next focus group being out to compare the efficacy of these different interventions. So I think that is it.
Thank you very much, Nick. We have at least one question, or a question for you, and it's from Richard Daniels from the Department for Education. Richard, do you want to put your question, or do you want me to read it? You can unmute yourself and ask.
Well, it's just that, can we make sure that costs or whole life costs include maintenance, particularly around filters?
Yeah, I think we'll have to think about that in the interventions we identify. I agree.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks. Anyone else have questions for Nick? I don't see any raised hands. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Nick. That was very, very helpful. And let's move on now to focus area 3, where Mike Holland is going to tell us what that involves. So I'll hand over to you, Mike. Do you want to share your screen?
Yep, I will do.
Okay, don't rush.
I've just noticed I'm apparently sitting in a prison cell according to the image. So, don't worry, this isn't being broadcast from HM Prison or anything like that. Right, that should be the one. That should just be the presentation, I think.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Full screen and everything.
All right, thank you for that. Thanks, Nick, for your acknowledgement of the links between our 2 focus areas. I'm presenting this on behalf of other people involved in the focus area. My co-lead is Rungming Yao, who is currently on her way to China, but also involved in this from the outset of Fangjin Fan, Elsa, and Leora as well. Just a bit about myself for those who don't know me. I'm a freelance consultant, have been for the last 18 years. I'm also linked to the Centre for Environmental Policy at Imperial College and a member of COMEP, the Department for Health's Committee on the Medical Effects of Air Pollutants. My work's split roughly 50-50 between air pollution policy and chemicals policy, and it focuses on impact assessment and economics. And hence, this leads me into the prioritisation task. When we talk about prioritisation, the first step is obviously working out what the objective is of the prioritisation. And we've tried to come up with a fairly short statement of that: obtaining the maximum benefits for the resources that are available. When we're talking about benefits, we're obviously concerned with the health of children and staff, the learning experience of the children, and the working environment for children and staff as well. There may be other benefits that people want to put in, and we'll be glad to take them on board. Also important to think about the resources that are available. There will be some through school budgets, there'll be some through other sources as well, such as national or local government grants, broader initiatives by local authorities, in particular the air quality action plans that many local authorities are producing. We need to see what the links are to those plans. And also some other sources, resources as well, as listed there. Important to think about these resources. If we're going to prioritise something, we have to be sure that people are actually going to be able to implement our recommendations. The methods for prioritisation go from the rather straightforward going out and asking people what their views are to rather more sophisticated approaches and complex approaches. Don't always give a necessarily better answer than going out and asking people, to be honest, but there's various techniques available. Cost effectiveness analysis, for example, enables us to rank the performance of different measures against particular objectives. It might be reducing CO2 or particulate levels in classrooms. So we rank those against cost in terms of their effectiveness. Cost benefit analysis brings together a number of a much wider range of effects than cost effectiveness analysis typically does. Tries to put them all into the same pot, based around very much around economic techniques of valuation, which creates some problems here because a number of the effects we can anticipate from the measures we'll be looking at won't be easily amenable to valuation. For that, we can use multi-criteria decision analysis, which does allow other kinds of input to be put into the process to define performance against various criteria and also provide a weight of the importance of those criteria. Ideally, I think we should try and use these approaches together in some way and take advantage of the pros of each of them, and hopefully eliminate the cons which certainly exist. Now, putting all those approaches together does sound complicated, so something I have to stress is that we will need clarity with respect to both the recommendations that we come up with and the rationale for those recommendations. We've got to have, got to make sure that people actually understand why we're recommending things. And not just the people who will be in charge of managing those recommendations and implementing them on the ground, but also other members of the school community, the school children, etc., their parents and so on. We must also consider uncertainties, and I've learnt to my cost that uncertainty must be expressed in a way that people actually understand and is relevant to the needs of the audience we're addressing. And there's a specific focus for the uncertainty, which is how does it affect the prioritised list of measures? Are there things that would, that given the uncertainties that are present, are there things that could drop off the list? Are there things that could come into the list? How would the ordering of the list be affected? So there's a fairly narrow focus, I think, on the outputs of the uncertainty analysis for our particular activity. Key performance indicators. These need to be derived in collaboration both with the other two focus areas you've heard from already, focus area 1 for understanding the problem, focus area 2 on solutions. And there's a broad range of these key performance indicators. They might relate to the condition of the indoor air. They might relate to the health of people in the school as reflected through school attendance, staff sickness, possibly also asthma incidents. Other indicators are available, of course. And then other effects, noise, cost, and so on. It'll be interesting to see how much we can boil a list of possible indicators down to a fairly narrow set that covers all of our objectives for this, all of our needs for this work. Criteria that will affect the prioritisation. I've already mentioned the performance against the key performance indicators, but there's also school-related factors. How well is the building maintained? What kind of building is it? Where is it? The maturity of measures. Are these measures that are new to the market? And if so, how confident can we be about their outcome? Also, are they available quite generally to people? Are we going to be recommending things that are actually quite hard to put in place? How much do they cost? Where does the money come from? What kind of effects are they going to have? Where is the contamination coming from? And we also need to pay some attention to the future, what's in particular in relation to climate actions, which will have some rather fundamental impacts, I think, on some of the measures that we could recommend. At the extremes, they could make some of the options redundant, and we may also have new options coming in that aren't currently widely implemented. We are aware that there are already some existing tools, and our default position is as a networking activity, it's obviously desirable that we associate with those initiatives to share the knowledge, share the contacts, and also it would be useful to start from something that already works. The question then is how best to integrate the outputs from the TAPAS network into those existing activities. And I'll be honest about that. I think that could be a significant challenge, but I think it's something that is worth looking into for the future. So with that, I think I will end. Back to you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike. That was very very helpful. You have a question. We have a question from Richard again. Perhaps you've already answered it, but he said, do we need to consider climate change risk analysis, for example, in relation to summertime overheating and increased pollution?
Yeah, I think we do. We need to make sure that the measures that we prioritise are kind of future-proofed. So issues like that do need to come in. And hopefully I covered that in my set of criteria with the future at the top. So thanks for the question, Richard.
Yeah, I think you do cover it, but yes. Anyone else have questions for Mike? No? Okay, in which case we'll move on to focus area 4. And Larissa Lockwood is going to tell us about that. So I'll pass over to you, Larissa.
I'm just finding my page to share with you.
Okay.
Great. So focus group 4 is all around dissemination and participation. Although thinking about it, we should probably flip that and think about participation first of all, and then the dissemination. So yes, I am not an academic, so this is when the sort of program starts, the sort of outreach and engagement phase, I suppose. My name's Larissa. I'm the Director of Clean Air at Global Action Plan. We're an environmental change charity working to really support and fuel the clean air movement across a variety of audiences, but we're working, we have a heavy focus with schools at the moment. Recently launched our Clean Air for Schools programme and the Clean Air for Schools framework, which I'll talk about a little bit later, to really help schools to develop their own bespoke clean air action plan. We're also working on the advocacy side, from practitioner to policy. I am co-chairing this group with Mark Winterbottom, who is maybe on the call right now. I know he's teaching today as well. And he works at the University of Cambridge, where he's a senior lecturer in education and has a big interest in classroom environmental variables and their impact on learning, and experience in inquiry projects working with schools and teacher education. Then the members of the group, we've got Sarah West from the Stockholm Environment Network at the University of York. So she really sits across science, policy and practice, with a big focus on sustainable development and experience in citizen science. Matteo Carpentieri from the University of Surrey. He works in the Environmental Flow Research Centre, looking at the interaction between outdoor and indoor air quality. Then there's Martin van Royevich, correct me if I'm wrong, Martin, apologies, at Imperial, and he's also involved in the modelling of airflow and in making the case for blue-green infrastructure. Mike Bithell at the University of Cambridge is involved in agent-based modelling, including in schools and air pollution, where models, I think this is quite interesting for this work area, because models can be built visually and interactively, almost sort of gamification, if you like, which could be very useful tools for dissemination. And finally, Mark Stetler, also from Imperial, who's very experienced in measuring air pollution and also has developed a number of outreach projects, including one that we launched together recently, the world's first air pollution footprint calculator, and is very keen to get students using measurement equipment. So I think our first role as a group really is to, our first priority is to help other focus groups to achieve their aims. So those of you from those focus groups today, please do invite us to your meetings. We'd love to, not all of them, but some of them, to really help you to communicate and disseminate your findings. And also hopefully we can help inform some of the work programs using insights from the schools. So I think we feel in Focus Group 4 that we are kind of that interface with the schools, and that it's important for this program that we co-develop solutions with schools so that they are as relevant and applicable and helpful as they possibly can be. So in terms of our work program, it looks a little bit like this. So schools, as you can see, underpins it all. And first of all, we really need to work out with schools, what support do schools need to tackle air pollution? Trying not to make any assumptions. And also we need to find out what's the best way to reach schools and to secure impact. Because it may be that we have, through this we can develop some really good insights and excellent tools, but if they're not communicated in the right way, or they don't make that case, or the environment around the schools isn't conducive to actually doing anything about clean air, then they won't be used. So we really need to make sure we're creating the right solutions and finding the best way to reach schools and secure impact. So early on, we want to sort of do this research with schools by doing things like putting out a survey, focus groups, one-to-one discussions. And if anybody on this call has routes out to schools, networks that we could send a survey out to, please do let me know. And then those insights, we'd like to feed them into the 3 other focus groups. And then along the way, while those focus groups are finding tools and resources, this is a 3-year program, so we don't just want to come out at the end communicating to schools, but are there things along the way that we can do to help schools on their journey to becoming clean air schools, by sharing tools, sharing resources, sharing insights. And then finally, nearer the end of the program, helping to communicate the outputs from these focus groups to the schools. So quite an involved process throughout. However, engagement with schools isn't straightforward, it's not simple. And when we thought about dissemination, we thought about sort of three key kind of approaches. So this essential role of participation, so co-developing those solutions with the schools, the communication, so articulating the case for action to schools, really what is the problem and what's the opportunity. At Global Action Plan, we have access to, or will very shortly have access to, a regularly updated list of the 2,000 most polluted schools in the UK. We think it's important to target those in the areas of highest air pollution, because they're the ones who really need the most support, but also to present to the school not just what the problem is, but what's the opportunity, you know, how much difference is this going to make to children's education and health outcomes, and of course sharing those tools and resources with them. And then on the research side, the research about the best approaches to achieve impact, and also to inform the other focus groups. So looking in a bit more detail on each, on participation, we need to get different stakeholders to take action within their own context. So not just thinking about one particular type of teacher, but thinking about students, teachers, middle leaders, head teachers, academy change leaderships, DFE, all sorts, and really finding out what their starting position is, and the best approaches that would work with them, and then how we get into those schools. Is it through science club projects? Is it through you know, games? Is it through I don't know, modeling or coding projects that can be done in class, and sort of involving participants early on in that co-development. Then in terms of communication, it really is that focus on areas of high air pollution, making school leaders aware that they have a problem, but in a helpful way. So not just going to them with that data, but sharing how we can, you know, there are solutions to help them tackle it. And also we'd love to build a network of participating and interested schools. There's already a great sort of network of schools and nurseries in London that come together to share best practice. It'd be excellent to do something similar nationally, where we can sort of communicate via all sorts of different routes, and can continue to update schools on the resources and tools that are available to them. And then, yes, the research, using research to inform and develop participation and communication. So looking at teachers' perception of the impact of air quality on learning and behaviour, to establish useful approaches to participant engagement. So looking at and so on. So those will be sort of our starting points and our programme of action. Happy to take questions on that in a moment. Sophie did also suggest that I quickly talk about the Clean Air for Schools framework, which is something we've developed at Global Action Plan. It very much aims to pull together and is built on the existing research and evidence and tools that are out there to help a school to develop their own bespoke action plan. Ideally, you know, every school would get their own audit to find out what they could do to tackle air pollution. But we also know that schools don't just have a role to tackle air pollution. Someone's not on mute. To tackle air pollution, not just through their own operations by looking at you know, deliveries and indoor air quality, but also what's going on at the school gate in terms of the school run. Then the role of schools in terms of educating students and those messages that get home to parents, and then using the student voice as well to influence and work with local partners, major local polluters, to work with the local authority, to work with local businesses, to really tackle that sort of area-wide pollution. So of course, it'd be nice if every school in the land could have a detailed audit to help them work out what the best actions are, but that's not always possible. So we wanted to develop a tool that helped schools to do this themselves. Hopefully you can still see my screen. Shout if you can't.
We can,
Yeah,
but not
I
the
can see,
plan.
yeah, I can see it.
You can.
Yes.
Great. Thanks. So it starts by you plug in some, we want this to be as sort of bespoke as possible. So you start by plugging in a bit of detail about your school.
Larissa, sorry, I don't think it's showing the right screen. We're still on your PowerPoint screen.
Oh, okay. That's much less interesting. Let's try this. It should all go a bit pink now.
Yeah.
Is that showing up, Sophie?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yes. Thanks. Great, so it looks very pink. So you plug in some basic information about your school, answer some questions, is it next to an A road? Can you open your windows and so on? And then it shows a selection of actions that you can choose. So it sort of filters these actions by the answers to the questions above. And then it ranks these potential actions for you to choose based on their relative impact on reducing air pollution, their relative cost, and their relative ease to implement. And of course, there are many gaps in the data around this. So we've built this using the best of our knowledge based on things like the GLA toolkit and all the other sort of resources that are out there. So I'd love the learnings from the other focus groups, to feed into this and make this even better. But you can see that you can choose which actions you want to do, or whether it's not applicable or you already do it. It then builds it into your own action plan that you can then download and use. So it suggests the things you could do. So if you want to promote active travel on the school run, these are some of the kinds of actions you could do. Start a walking bus, create and share a low pollution map, do a week-long active travel challenge. It shares some of the co-benefits. And again, if the research is finding what some of the co-benefits are, it'd be great to sort of flesh these out a bit. And then we've also linked through to all the existing resources that we could find that exist to help schools on their way. So whether that's to use the Living Streets Walk to School Week materials, or the Clean Air Routes map, the Sustrans guide on cycling to school, and there's case studies from other schools who've done this. So then you can come back in here and sort of update your plan once you've done various actions. So this is an existing tool. We launched it 2 weeks ago. It's free to use, but it should help schools starting on their journey to develop their own sort of tailored clean air action plan. And hopefully it can be one of a sort of useful tool for this network and something that we can develop and utilize. I think I will stop sharing there. Thank you. I think you're on mute, Paul.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Larissa. That was very interesting. And we have a couple of questions. Both from Richard Daniels, I think. One saying, have you or will you develop curriculum-related resources? And if so, which areas of the curriculum would these cover?
Yeah, there's loads of curriculum-linked resources in here in that framework. Many of them are linked to STEM subjects, but yeah, lots of primarily Key Stage 1 and 2 at the moment. And yes, we do link up with eco schools. The place where that framework sits is on Transform Our World, which is a teacher hub platform. It's got resources from WWF and RSPB and all the other sort of organizations who do stuff. And teachers test and rate the various resources, and eco schools are a very big partner on that platform.
And there was another question from Richard, I think, which is, are you linking up with, did you just say eco schools? Did I just?
Yeah, I did.
There you
Yeah.
are. Okay, so fine.
And I should say, I didn't say at the beginning, but we developed this framework with 19 schools in Manchester. So it was very much driven by their needs and informed by the kinds of actions that they thought were they could do as well. And we tested it with them throughout the development of the framework.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have questions for Larissa? If not, I'll just go back to the schematic of the project. So this is what I showed earlier, and I hope now you can, we filled in some of the detail about the various 4 focus groups. And I hope you can begin to see how they might contribute towards the goals that we've identified. I should say that these goals are still in early stages, so we may well expand or change these, and certainly as we learn more about the problems involved, I imagine some evolution of all of this. Each of the focus area teams that have been were mentioned during these presentations will meet regularly during the course of the project. So for example, focus area 1 at the moment meets every 2 weeks. I believe focus area 2 meets once a month, and so on. And what we are very interested in, and this will be something we'll discuss later on this afternoon, is how our partners might engage in that. And one possibility, of course, is for partners to identify with one or more of these focus areas and attend those meetings. And the times and so forth will be advertised on the web page. And so you'll be able to join as and when you can. And we would very much encourage that and welcome it, because I do think that's how we're going to take this work forward. And to coordinate everything, the leads of the various focus areas then meet together, so we have an opportunity to see how the 4 areas are evolving, and to discuss the interactions between them as the project continues. So that's the way we're actually working at the moment. We've just started these discussions, as you can imagine. And as we go forward over the coming months, then these things will develop towards the ideas, certainly for focus areas 1 and 2, as I said, of holding a workshop and some review publication in the spring and early summer of next year is the current plan. So when we come back after lunch, we'll hear from some of the network partners. And then, as I said, after that, we will have an opportunity to talk amongst ourselves about the best ways to engage everyone, and to share information and for people to feel involved. Okay, so I hope that gives you a brief. I know it's brief, but an overview of the project and how we're planning to operate. As I said, we'll now have a 30-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll have a number of presentations from our various partners. All looks fascinating. I suggest that you don't leave the meeting necessarily. You can just put yourself on mute and turn your video off, and then come back on half an hour. But if you do leave, we can readmit you later on this afternoon in 30 minutes. So I'll see you all at 12:30. Okay. All right. And thanks very much to the presenters for their presentations this morning. Thank you. Okay, I'll resume the recording. And Peter, when you're ready, if you'd like to share your screen and give us your presentation, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
No, I can just see you still.
Oh, okay. Bear with me.
All right. Yeah, looking good. Now I can see your screen. Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So thank you very much, Paul, for the opportunity to speak this morning, and good afternoon to everyone else. So yeah, as Paul said, I'm the Service Manager for Air Quality and Environmental Protection. I'm going to be speaking about the work that we've done in Waltham Forest with schools, and particularly focusing on air pollution in the last few years. So just a bit of background about Waltham Forest. For those who don't know, we're an outer London borough, in northeast London. We sort of border onto Epping Forest, but certainly the southern part of the borough has got many sort of characteristics that inner London boroughs have. Population around about 275,000 people. We were one of the host boroughs for the 2012 Olympics, and that did bring quite a lot of significant investment into the borough, and the council was really starting to think about the need for sort of a sustainable approach to development, and how we could capitalise on the benefits of the Olympics. In 2013, the Mayor of London announced some significant funding for improvements to cycling in London, and there was a sort of competition for funding for 3 boroughs under the banner of Mini Holland to improve cycling. Waltham Forest bid and was one of the successful authorities. The council's vision for cycling was that Waltham Forest would become a cycling and walking borough. We were looking to develop a network of excellent cycle routes, make residential areas great places to cycle and live, improve cycle parking, involve the community, getting more people to cycle. And really making a sort of modal shift so that up to 10% of journeys within Waltham Forest would be by bike. So it was recognised we need to make cycling safer, and we would monitor our progress and learn from what we were doing. And our banner for the Mini Holland project is called Enjoy Waltham Forest. We have a microsite which you can see the link here, which sort of sets out what a lot more detail about what we wanted to do. A significant part of this has been working with schools, and particular reasons for this was, or it was recognised that the impact of air pollution on schools was quite significant. We found that half of car journeys in outer London are less than 2 miles, so eminently possible to walk or cycle. School run journeys in London account for about 1 in 5 car journeys. We knew that children are particularly affected by air pollution, and this was a fantastic opportunity to influence behaviour of children and their parents. And just on the right hand side, one of the reports that we commissioned actually looked at the air pollution impact of the school run, and these maps show the contribution to annual mean pollution levels. And there is more detail. This report's on the council website. Oops. So we've used the Transport for London STARS project. This is a framework for working with schools, encouraging sustainable travel, active, responsible, safe journeys. And there are a range of activities which can be tailored to what each school wants to do. So we engage, or we have engaged with schools. We talked to them about the issue, and found out what they want to do. So it's very much a sort of partnership. We've been helping them to sort of build on their on the different measures which are appropriate to their schools. There are different standards bronze, silver and gold. And you can see from the chart on the right hand side how schools have sort of they've started off with certain measures, they've got themselves to bronze and then built on that, and now we've now got 57 schools accredited. Some of the other activities and events I've mentioned here. There are a lot of other things. I haven't been able to put everything in, but this year or last year we had 52 primary schools participating in Walk to School Week. We've run for the last few years a mini tour de Waltham Forest, which is cycle groups or schools involved in doing tours around the or parts of the borough on bikes. 19 primary schools last year, 190 pupils. We've had something similar for secondary schools, which is called the Team Tour de Waltham Forest, and you can see the picture on the bottom right. This took place in the Olympic Park at the velodrome site, which is a great opportunity and very exciting for everyone involved. We've also done a pedometer challenge in 2019, encouraging people pupils to walk to school, and we distributed around about 7,000 pedometers to school children so they could count their steps, and that was a great success. So anything else I wanted to mention at this point? On our website, if you have a look, where we worked with Groundwork and schools in the borough a few years ago, and they produced some fantastic mini videos about air pollution, which I look at. I look at them again and again. I think they're really good, and I think there was, it really had a good impact on the schools who were involved. So there are lots of great opportunities to influence behaviour and engage with children in these ways. We've been running for the last couple of years a number of events about anti-idling. So you'll see in the picture on the left-hand side, we've got these stands which we put up, and then around schools, either at the arrival or departure time, and we talk to parents and drivers about idling. And you'll see in the sort of bottom picture, that's actually our portfolio holder, Councillor Lokes, talking to a driver about anti-idling. So there is commitment right across the council to these initiatives. It's been very successful. Most drivers are actually quite receptive to this, and do understand it, but there's still a lot of idling does go on. As part of this, we also have done anti-idling school assemblies, and work with pupils on air pollution issues. On the right hand side, this is an example of some green screens that we've installed at 8 schools so far. So where there are playgrounds near busy roads, there's obviously lots of concern about the impact of pollution for the children, and this is an attempt to try and address that, so the plants can actually capture some of the pollutants and actually make it a sort of a less polluting, or the playground a less polluting space, as well as sort of providing quite a nice visual impact as well. Most of our work so far has been very much about behaviour change and engagement and persuasion, but we are now moving into another phase, which is enforcement, so actually prohibiting cars from driving into certain school streets at school start and finish times. And there's quite a lot of boroughs around London and the country looking at this. So the aim is to make the area around schools safer and healthier at the start and end of the school day. We've got 9 schemes in place at the moment, and 1 more starting next month, and then hopefully more the year after. And just to finish off, we can see that we commissioned some work in 2018 looking at the measures that we had used or implemented as part of the Enjoy Waltham Forest project to look at what NO2 and other pollutant levels might be in 2020. The modelling very clearly showed that we've had a very positive impact and reduced pollution levels through these measures. That's a really good story, but it's still clear there's a lot more to do, and that's why we're very pleased to be part of this TAPAS project. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. There are a couple of questions in the chat you might look at. I think we should not stop now to take questions, but carry on. But if you want to have a look at that, please.
I will do. Yeah, thank you.
And that was very, very encouraging, and we look forward to working with you in the future. So let's move on now to Owen Connick, who is at Hall Lee. If you could stop sharing your screen, please.
Yes, I'm just sorry. I'm just trying to work out how to do it. And
up the top, it usually says stop sharing or something. If you go up to the top, it says viewing options, I think.
Right, okay.
Move your mouse up to the top. No.
I think it's at the bottom actually, Peter.
Okay.
If you go right the way down, there's a little kind of panel that pops up at the bottom with a green button in the middle.
That's it. I've done it. Yes, sorry about that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so as I was saying, Owen Connick is a Sustainability Associate at Hall Lee. So Owen, you're on. Thank you.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay, Paul?
Yes, I can, and I can see your screen.
Great stuff. Okay. Thanks very much for the opportunity to just say a little bit about us today and our involvement with this. I have been delighted to be involved with a number of the kind of precursors to the TAPAS project. I think the MAGIC project in particular has been really successful in terms of the community that it's developed. So hopefully TAPAS will be just as successful. To introduce my company, Hall Lee is a building services consultancy. We focus on a number of different specialisms with engineers, designers and technical specialists. So we do a lot of work around modelling of buildings at design stage, but also through commissioning, construction and post-occupancy. In terms of the TAPAS project in particular, we are doing a number of things within the company already, which I think will be interesting to link in and kind of share and learn from the other people in the network here. Some of these are laid out on the slide here. Monitoring indoor air quality in particular is something we do as part of sort of general performance evaluation of projects, and is always really interesting. I'm sure a lot of people get this, that we actually get quite a number of direct inquiries from school head teachers sort of asking for advice on certain areas. Our air quality team within Hall Lee is very interested at the moment in the air quality implications internally of furnishings and internal finishes, which I know Richard Daniels is talking later, and Richard and I have had many discussions on that topic. I think it'll be a great opportunity for the TAPAS network to pull together sort of specialists who are already involved in other bodies. The Institute of Air Quality Management, IAQM, and the CIBC Air Quality Working Group in particular, I think we'll have really relevant sort of special interests. And I'm a keen member of the CIBC Schools Design Group, who are a really good group in terms of forward-thinking influences on school designs, particularly how those can influence sort of the evolution of design standards and regulations and things. I want to touch on one project that Hall Lee were heavily involved with recently, which is called the Untapped Schools Project. It was a UKRI and BEIS funded scheme to look in particular at energy consumption in schools, and with the ambition of examining the energy consumption and identifying opportunities for savings and learning from those energy consumption figures. So we were able to obtain, or the ambition was to obtain, high resolution data from smart meters, generating simple energy saving advice. It's fair to say that the outcomes of the project were some good and some bad, so they were a little bit mixed. But the one thing I wanted to sort of highlight today is we did generate a web portal in collaboration with the other members of the project team, which provided a really simple interface for either the engineers working on the scheme or the schools themselves to log in and have a look at their own energy consumption, have a look at how it varies over time, and then make generic or specific recommendations for what they might look to do to improve energy consumption. Now, TAPAS obviously is focusing on air quality and air pollution in particular, but I think the lessons learned and the network of schools developed through the Untapped project might be quite useful to try and transfer across into studies looking more specifically about air pollution. I thought I won't do any more technical slides. I thought I'd lay out some of my ambitions and questions that I would kind of like to see approached through the TAPAS project. And I'll admit I added one or two to these as the morning session went through. As anyone, I know a lot of people on here were involved on Magic, and you'll know therefore that one of my key mantras is all about sort of communication. I think it's almost pointless doing great research if you then never tell anyone about it. So I think communicating the outputs to schools and to the Department for Education, and we have representation here, is great. And Larissa was mentioning that earlier, and I was very keen to hear that. But I think communicating it to consultants such as myself and architects and others in the design community, I think we can do loads around that, and it will really aid the impact. I'm a keen cyclist, and I've been following a lot of the development, probably driven hugely since the pandemic started, with low traffic neighborhoods and also the school streets campaigns. And I think they're fantastic. There was a question in the chat earlier about do we have any monitored data around how effective those are? I think that would be great to try and gather data or collect data on the effectiveness of those, and then again see if we can communicate it. I am quite interested in how effective things like urban greening initiatives. So there was a photo from Peter just now with a nice kind of green wall type arrangement. I'm interested to see evidence for how effective they are. I'm keen to promote them if they are effective, but I'm sort of cautious in promoting things without knowing whether they actually do have a positive impact on air quality. The last 3 points here are some things that I just want to pose as to the kind of TAPAS network of whether or not this is where we want to go. So they're sort of open questions, and I'd invite anyone else to chip in. I think there was a mention earlier of looking at the whole school estate, and I do think that would be a really interesting piece of work. It's also, in my view, a really, really big piece of work. So I think we should have a discussion around whether or not we attempt to attack that. I then think, targeting on selected schools, which is what the Untapped project did, would be a kind of a step down from that. But if it's more achievable, it may be a better goal to set ourselves. The City Schools Design Group, in collaboration with the Department for Education, has an ongoing project to look at climate adaptation in UK schools. And I think it would be very interesting to link, climate changes and future projected changes to outside air quality and how that might impact any conclusions we can make from this project. And finally, as a design consultant, I'm often slightly frustrated by how much of design is driven by planning requirements or local authority stipulations, in that the developer will very often design just to what the planning requires and no further. So I think it'd be interesting to see what we can do in terms of influencing or engaging with planning authorities in order to influence designs of new build schools in that way. So those are some of my ambitions and questions. I will stop there and actually on time and hand over, but I'm happy to take questions, Paul, if you want to open the floor.
Thank you very much, Owen. Does anybody have a question for Owen? We have a moment or two. I don't hear anybody at this point. By all means, if something occurs to you, please put it in the chat and we can respond that way. I think that's useful. Before I leave this talk, I would like to acknowledge the fact that it was Owen who came up with the acronym TAPAS, and no project gets funded without a good acronym. So I owe him a lot, and it's been a pleasure to work with him over a number of years now. So thank you, Owen. So we'll move on now to the next speaker, who is Ed Whelan from Cundall. He's also part of the CIBSE Air Quality Group. And so, Ed, if you want to share your screen, please. And I can see that. That looks good. You just need to go, yep, you're there.
Beginning, right help. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Ed Whelan. I am a chartered mechanical engineer and also chair of CIBSE's Air Quality Working Group. So my experience is mostly in building physics, mechanical design and sustainability. But I've got 10 years of experience that covers all sorts of things. So these days I'm head of research and innovation, which means I get to talk to universities and groups like this. And yeah, my interests include air quality, but are not limited to that. The interest in air quality came from spending 4 years in Shanghai, where it looks like that, and that sort of piqued the interest more than a little. So that was one of the air apocalypse days where it was over, AQI was over 600. So I'm going to start off, I'm wearing two hats today. I'm going to start off with the CIBSE Air Quality Group and what we're doing there. I'm also a member of the Knowledge Generation Panel at CIBSE. So for those that don't know who CIBSE are, it's the Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineers. So it's the professional body that represents the people that design ventilation systems and heating systems and that sort of thing. So the Air Quality Group's mission statement is to use engineering skill to support the pursuit of healthy air quality in the built environment. So it's very much about how do we practically do things to improve and support air quality in the built environment. Obviously, TAPAS is looking particularly at schools, and we're definitely involved in that, but we are covering all sorts of buildings. So I'm preaching to the choir here, but we're doing it because it disproportionately affects the young and the infirm, and because it's a major health risk. So what are we actually doing? We're advocating for improvements in the regulatory environment. So that's something CIBSE is quite active in doing generally, but that's mostly involves responding to kind of calls for evidence at government, trying to get involved in consultations and try to provide the engineering perspective to try and improve things so that we end up with better health outcomes. On the ground, we're also trying to provide sorts of best practice to engineers around air quality. So I think it's fairly safe to say that most mechanical engineers have a bit of knowledge about it, in that they know that they probably should put filters in urban areas, and they'll refer to CIBSE guys to do that. But in terms of general knowledge around the issues of air quality and the interactions between the outdoor world and indoor world, they're fairly ignorant of it. And also to build key links with key stakeholders and share the science. So that's kind of why links to things like TAPAS and similar networks are important to us. So it covers all sorts of areas. Advocacy, as I've mentioned, kind of outputs, so providing that guidance, and then everything related to air quality that a CIBSE member might need to know about. So it's quite a broad brief, and members of that group include all sorts of people. It's not just engineers like myself. We have air quality consultants from companies like Paul Linden. We have measuring and monitoring specialists, academics, people that represent industry, other similar industry bodies, so moisture, for example, which also affects air quality, and public health professionals. So in terms of what we can do for the TAPAS group and the kind of things we're able to provide, we can certainly provide real life gaps in knowledge. We know we've got a good understanding of what our members are lacking when it comes to knowledge about air quality. We've got, and one of the main things that I think we're looking to get from TAPAS is information to disseminate. So that best practice, that understanding of what is the cutting edge of research in areas in the schools, and actually disseminate that to our members so that they're designing in the right way. And as Owen just mentioned, it's about finding a multidisciplinary group of practitioners who can, again, form a larger network with groups like the IIQM and also to other CIBSE groups. So my colleague Alan will be speaking a little bit later about the school design group, and they have other similar priorities but with a slightly different angle. So I'm also representing Cundall. We are, again, much like Hawley, we're a multidisciplinary engineering consultancy. We've got offices all over the world. We've got 5 or 6 in the UK. And we cover all sorts of things, including specialist air quality type measurements, but primarily things like building services engineering, sustainability, structural engineering, that sort of thing. So we are the people that are actually designing buildings on a day-to-day basis for our clients. The reason we're quite focused on things like air quality is we've gone through the SDGs and picked out the 6 that we think are particularly relevant to us, and health and wellbeing is pretty key to that. But air quality and maintaining it and the kind of design issues around it also fit into a few of the other issues there. So climate change adaptation, zero carbon energy, all of those have an impact or are linked in some way to air quality. So I think it's pretty important. Personally, I'm responsible for a lot of the kind of research activities that Cundall do, and we have a number of priorities that that we are interested in, particularly at the moment. So sustainability is obviously pretty key to that, and health and wellbeing fits into that as well. But we've also got quite a kind of a digital approach to a lot of the engineering, or we're trying to develop a more digital approach to the engineering that we're doing. So an interest in kind of new methods of either of measurement or of simulation or anything like that, which I think a few of the TAPAS members will be able to talk about. So I have a small team of people within the company that seek relationships with clients and institutions that might help us to innovate. So I think TAPAS will hopefully be producing pretty cutting edge research around air quality in schools, and we'd look to use that and incorporate it into our business and our ways of working. So in terms of the sort of research that we've done internally, similar to some of the things that Owen's company have been doing, we've developed our own monitoring devices. We've been monitoring our own offices and offices of our clients in terms of air quality for years now. We've also looked into the link between productivity, air quality and productivity in our own offices and others, and have been trying to develop tools both to predict that and also to monitor it. And some other stuff completely unrelated to air quality is quite interesting. So things like, this is particularly related to schools. We've got quite a good relationship with people like Richard Daniels, who's about to speak about the DFE perspective. We've got a good relationship with the Department for Education. We do a lot of work designing schools, run a lot of school frameworks, and as a result of that, we like to push kind of the engineering boundaries of what we can do. So this is a kind of example where we've looked at the daylight perspective and used machine learning to improve the ways that we simulate daylight. I think it's beyond CO2. I think in terms of air pollution in schools, I think the design stage tools and things like that are a little lacking beyond sort of CO2. So I think the guidance is there, but actually understanding how the outside world and the kind of outside IAQM type air pollution kind of world, how that impacts on what we should be designing ventilation systems for on a day-to-day, that I think is the sort of thing that we'd really like to find out. So I've flown through everything there, but if anyone's got any questions, let me know.
Thank you very much, Ed. That's very interesting, and we have time for a question or two if someone has one. Would like to raise it now.
Yeah, I have a question, Paul.
Yep, please.
I saw on the last slide you had kind of poorer air quality by the windows. Is that right, Ed?
Oh, sorry, that was a daylight slide. That wasn't air quality.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks very much. We will move on, if that's okay. The next person is Sandra Hoyes, I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yes, yes, you did.
From Groundwork. And are you doing a double act with Danielle, or is it just you?
Yes, that's right, double act with Danielle. And I hope my screen share is going to work, because I wasn't able to see Ed's slides. So I'm trying to screen share now, but I've been having some connectivity issues, so hopefully.
If not, Sandra, I could screen share from
okay, great. It's thinking about it. Let's give it a couple of seconds. Okay, can you see it?
No.
No.
Oh.
No.
Still not?
Still not.
You hear me?
Yeah. Oh, hang on. It's saying that you've started screen sharing.
Yep.
Yeah. Can you see it?
Not quite, but it's
not quite.
yes.
Yep. Now we can.
Got it.
Okay, lovely. It says my connection is unstable, so please bear with me and let me know if there are any issues. But yes, so thank you for inviting us. I'm just going to provide an overview of Groundwork and how we are improving air quality, working in partnership with others. Okay. I'm very sorry. It's not really working. Danielle, you might have to screen share. It's not working for me.
Yeah, I'll do it from here. No worries.
You'll have to stop sharing first, though, Sandra.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very sorry. You'd have thought we're better at technology. It's literally the first time this has happened.
Don't worry. So can you share yours, Danielle?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Great. So just for those of you who don't know, we are London's foremost social and environmental regeneration charity. We have over 30 years experience of working in London, delivering projects to improve open spaces and support greener living and working. We have a large multidisciplinary team working with us. We're a registered landscape design practice. We've got chartered landscape architects and urban designers working with us. We've got a community engagement team, education team working with schools and higher education. We've got a business, employment skills and training team, and the team collectively have a wide range of skill sets and area of expertise. And we can bring together different teams to maximize impact that we have. And our ethos is based on partnership working and working collaboratively and flexibly and being responsive to the needs of our partners and communities that we're working in, and with a particular specialism of working with those most in need. We work around 3 core themes: that's creating better places, supporting greener living and working, and improving people's prospects. So our team, our landscape design team, improve open and green spaces and public realm improvements, and that includes street greening, depaving, SUDs, creating parklets, and encouraging active travel. We've got green infrastructure and behavior change projects. We manage grants, including for the GLA and TfL. So for example, we manage the Greener City Fund, including the school strand. We've got a team of green doctors working with us who carry out home visits to people in fuel poverty and help reduce CO2 emissions, and also looking at indoor air quality. And then finally, we have an employment skills and training team who support long-term unemployed people into employment, and we're also working in schools to promote access to green-collar jobs. In terms of air quality is one of our business priority areas, and our air quality work is focused on 3 key areas of expertise. The first one is designing and delivering public realm improvement projects, so that's street greening and testing out new technologies. Last year, we worked with the North Bank bid to deliver their business low emission neighborhood, and part of that was greening interventions and testing new technologies. We are looking at developing planting pallets that help to improve local air quality. We are constructing parklets, build out and green screens, including in schools. So we, for example, developed a parklet outside the school, and also advised a number of schools to erect green screens to provide to improve local air quality. The second strand is linking physical interventions and raising awareness. So, for example, there is well-being routes and promoting active travel. And finally, it's around sustainable behavior change, reducing emissions and exposure to air pollution, and we're maximizing impact by linking and layering the different types of interventions. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Danielle to specifically talk about air quality and education.
Hi there. So I am Danielle. I'm an area program manager as well for Groundwork, and I oversee, so Sandra oversees a lot of our land work and I oversee the education work. So we're working together because obviously this work overlaps the two kind of portfolios there. So a bit of background about our education work with air quality. We've delivered a number of air quality programmes within schools in the past. So we've worked with in Waltham Forest, in Haringey and in Sutton. And a lot of our work has previously been behaviour change with young people, and also looking at kind of curriculum-based activity in the classroom, also fieldwork. Whereas our most recent work is looking at a combination of classroom-based and also, you know, that curriculum work, but also the greening of the school grounds, and looking at kind of infrastructure change and landscape changes within the school. So for this programme, we've worked with a corporate funder, GPE, and they funded us to do some green space improvements with the 4 schools listed on the slide there. And just a bit of background is that, as I mentioned, our education and landscape team work quite closely together in order to deliver the programme, and also any kind of programme that we do is always based on a co-design methodology. So we will, if we're running education programmes, we'll have teacher panels. So the teachers review what we're delivering, and they say kind of where the priorities are within the school, so that we know where to pitch our work. And we will also have young people helping to design our actions, so that we know that they're going to be fun and engaging for young people. Also, the interventions for these 4 schools that we specifically focused on were based on the audits that they had with the GLA. So we worked with some schools that had already had their audits, and our role was really to kind of work with the schools to draw out an action plan from that audit, and to make sure that they had some tangible actions and things that they could do, rather than a set of problems. We worked with them to turn it into some solutions. So there's a list there of the types of kind of changes that we did within the schools, and they've included kind of new boundary hedges and green screens, and various different kind of landscape improvements, and selecting plants that are good for air quality, and also curriculum-based programme of work. No, it's not moving forward. There's some pictures of some green screens and some planting that we've done in one of the schools. And in terms of the behaviour change programmes that we run within the school, so as people have mentioned already, there's a whole host of really good curriculum-based activity work and session plans available, and we kind of refine them and make them bespoke for that school. But they include things like scientific experiments, measuring particulates, looking at data analysis with maths, if we can access diffusion tubes and things like that, analysing that data, greening and planting, linking to biology, route mapping, and traffic surveys linking to geography, and that's looking at kind of their routes to school and cleaner routes that they can be taking, and also creating action plans with the young people, so working with their eco schools groups, working with their classrooms, and looking at the young people creating action plans to make changes that they want to see. We have produced a toolkit that is available for all schools, and that looks at the types of things that they can do in response to their audit, and where they can go, and that toolkit is available for everyone, so I can put the link in the chat after this. And just in terms of what we want from the TAPAS network, so we deliver practical interventions, and we want to make sure that they are based on the latest technical knowledge. And so, you know, we've heard a lot about the types of research that are about to happen, and also that have already happened. And that, as Sandra said, is kind of, we work in partnership and in collaboration. So yeah, we just want to make sure that what we are delivering is all joined up. So I think I've run out of time, but I do have, I'll put a link in the chat to a lovely, just a 1.5 minute video. It's the video that the Waltham Forest mentioned earlier, that was produced by the young people, which is just an example of the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. I thought that was very interesting and engaging. I just wonder, with the work that you're doing with sort of curriculum stuff, is that just specific to a particular school, or does it get a broader kind of curriculum impact across the system?
So at the moment we are working with schools in particular. We haven't done any work looking at kind of the curriculum packs could be available to, you know, to kind of any schools, but we haven't done any work with the education department. But I believe someone from the education department is going to speak soon, so they might have more to say on that.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Does anybody else have a question for either Sandra or Danielle? And maybe you could stop sharing your screen.
Yes.
Danielle.
Yeah, I can actually stop share. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. It appears not, so we'll move on. But thank you again, and let's move on now to Andrea Lee, who's the Campaigns and Policy Manager for Client Earth. So when you're ready, Andrea, if you'd like to share your screen. I can see that. That looks good. Can't hear you yet.
I did the share screen, but I hadn't unmuted myself. Hi. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk here and share our thoughts with you. For those of you that don't know us, Client Earth is an environmental law charity. So we use the power of the law to protect the health of people and the environment. And obviously that's where air quality is a really good example about how those two are really linked. I guess we're a bit different from maybe some of the other organisations that have spoken so far, in that we don't necessarily deliver the practical aspects of the measures that are needed to tackle the problem, but we're obviously very keen on making the case for them and putting pressure on government at all levels to ensure that they do this. So yeah, I'll be taking, I guess, a much more sort of campaign policy position on this, which I hope is useful. I guess the background a bit to what we've been doing so far, hopefully some people are familiar with, sorry, I need to like work out how to do this. Is our legal challenges that we've had against the UK government for failing to meet legal limits of air pollution, specifically for nitrogen dioxide. These started as far back as 2011. The first case took a while to go through the High Court, Court of Appeal, European Court of Justice, and finally the UK Supreme Court. But what the courts have since then been very clear about is that the UK government has a responsibility to take action to meet these legal limits in the shortest time as possible. And in particular, the High Court in our second legal challenge outlined what the sort of key legal tests were around that, in terms of the government having to produce plans that showed what measures exactly it was going to take to meet legal limits in the shortest time as possible. Also, what measures it was going to take to not just meet legal limits in the shortest time as possible, but also to reduce people's exposure. So basically, it's not just about things that will get you to below 40 micrograms per meter squared, but meter cubed, but also where you can simply do things to reduce people's exposure, that's what you should be also be doing at the same time. And then thirdly, making sure that the measures that you're proposing won't just possibly lead to compliance, but have a strong likelihood that they will. And there the High Court also talked about the sort of definition of what could be considered as proportional, and introduced this idea that highlighted the idea that actually under the existing legal regime outlined by the directive, actually the primary determining factor is actually the efficacy of the measure. So basically, first you have to look at what is actually going to tackle the problem, and then only when you've got measures that will do exactly the same outcome can you start thinking about costs or political difficulties in terms of deciding which one you do. So we've been doing a lot of work to really sort of drive that legal pressure and use that legal pressure also to drive political pressure to get action. And that's where we've managed to get former Prime Minister to admit that more action is needed, former Secretary of State for Environment to reflect that they shouldn't have been in a position where we've been taking them to court. And in the past, the current Prime Minister, as Mayor of London, has also made positive statements about the need to take air quality. And also last year, recently, also acknowledged that there is a need and he has a desire to make the UK the best place to breathe clean air in the world. So this has driven some action. So lots of local authorities have been asked to create plans, and we've seen in London, the Mayor of London now bringing the ULEZ in sooner and committing to expanding it and doing a few other things. Recently, we finally got confirmation that Bath and Birmingham will be launching their clean air zones. The government's been giving more funding than ever to English local authorities to implement action. But unfortunately, it's still a long way to go. And in particular, because the feeling is that really the government has really passed the buck on to local authorities on this and taken what's really a national problem and sort of left them in the lurch with it, whilst at the same time not doing as much itself to make sure that beyond providing some financial support to local authorities, that it's actually doing any of the sort of policy levers at a national level to address the problem. So obviously the reason why we all care about air pollution is because it's affecting people's health. Outside of the legal fight that we've had, we obviously do our own advocacy work and campaigning. I've myself originally started off as a community engagement officer, and there I was working with community groups in London and helping them understand what the problem was in their local areas. You know, a lot of it started off with people actually either hearing about air pollution and thinking that that something was wrong and that they wanted to do something about it, or having a specific problem. So, you know, for instance, this school is a school that we've just done some campaign work before, you know, a few years ago, and they're a school that's based right on the North Circular, like basically the front of the school is on the North Circular in London. So these kids know a lot about air pollution and how it's affecting them. They're a school that, for instance, a few years ago when there was a particularly bad smog event, one of the school governors decided to keep children in during playtime, and not because he received any particular advice, basically because as a member of the public he'd seen the news and he'd thought something had to be done to protect the kids. So I think he got some media coverage for it, and the next day what he did, I think, also was, as the pollutions were going down, he basically just kept the kids, the school kept the kids that had respiratory conditions in as well. So there is definitely obviously a real need for schools to understand, you know, ways that they can protect their children. So things like this project are going to be well received, I'm sure. from there, because we were being contacted so frequently by parents, we started off with another organisation, the British Lung Foundation, the Clean Air Parents Network. And because we are a campaigning organisation, the focus of the Parents Network really is about bringing together, I mean, in London, I'm sure those that are based in London will know that there's a wealth of local campaign groups of parents, and in other cities there are also some, but there tend to be fewer. And what we wanted to do is be able to harness this desire by parents to you know, be able to protect their kids and ensure that their kids can grow up healthily in the towns and cities that they're based. So we started off the Parents Network in 2018, and yeah, it's interesting seeing the journey of the parents that have been involved. Again, I think they tend to come in from maybe two sort of general angles. Either they're just generally become aware about air quality and wonder what that's doing to their children, and then wonder what they can do. Or maybe they come up at it from a more local perspective because there's a specific issue that they've become aware of it, and then they make the link to air quality, and then they kind of want to deal with those issues. And from our perspective, I guess what we've been trying to do is encourage people to think a little bit beyond the hyper local measures, you know, like the moving of a bus stop away from the school entrance or the playground or those sort of things, which are very important locally. But I guess, you know, it can lead to quite a bit of a piecemeal approach. And so we're very sort of keen to kind of get that sort of understanding that it's just, you know, air quality obviously can be very local and very specific, but there are also wider in geography and also in policy contexts that needs to be addressed. So I guess in thinking about, reflecting a little bit about what's useful from academics and researchers is obviously things like the sort of many health bits of research that are constantly coming up that are adding to the weight of evidence that's really trying to kind of show the many different ways that air pollution affects us is really useful. And I think someone else earlier mentioned about the need to constantly communicate about this, and I couldn't agree more. I think you know, this is such a pressing and urgent issue. I'm sure that's why we're all on this call, is because we recognize that, you know, it doesn't have to be like this, and we do need to deal with it, because obviously the exposure that we are all getting, but in particular children are getting now, is going to be impacting us long into the distant future. So we do really need really urgent action to do this, and part of that urgent action, because, you know, funding has to come from somewhere, and that funding has to be prioritized by policy and decision makers, really the politicians. We do need that constant drumbeat of showing that there is an urgency and that there are solutions for this. So I totally echo that need for constant communications. And I think also somebody sort of talked about earlier, I think it was Mike Holland, talked about uncertainty, and I'd missed the beginning of the meeting, so I think I only came up halfway through his point. But uncertainty is also very important when communicating. I have seen, I've been in a meeting with councillors who were getting evidence from different experts, and this was in a session that had been convened by councillors because they wanted to do something about what they saw as the urgent urgency around air quality. And suddenly a public health official started talking, and they started talking in academic terms around uncertainties around the health risk and this, that, the other. And I saw how in that second, all the majority of the councillors switched from, okay, what can we do to tackle this problem, to, oh, so you're saying that we need more research to see what we need to do. So that was a bit of a, you know, I think it's really key, and I think it's something that campaigners would always ask experts to sort of think about. When I talk to experts at networking events, you know, when you're having the wine after, you get very direct urgency, the message of like air pollution impacts, and this is what we need to do. But then when you're in presentations and listening to the experts when they have their academic hats on, all you hear is different levels of uncertainty and all that sort of stuff. And it's very mixed messages. So I think it's really important in this project that we kind of think about the decision makers and what they're going to be hearing, and the policy context of all of this, and how we can make sure that as the project goes along, the outcomes are being generated that can help to shape that policy context as soon as possible, because it's such a urgent issue to take action on now. I know that this is a challenge because obviously academics need to be robust, and I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but I think it's something that just always needs to be borne in mind, is how we're going to be making use of all the knowledge and the certainty that we know that we need to take action on air pollution in order to protect the health of children and everybody really. So I think that's where I'll stop now, because I've probably gone over. So sorry about that.
That's fine, Andrea. Thank you very much. And yeah, I think that's excellent. I mean, one of the issues, of course, with indoor air pollution is that there are no legal limits on it. I mean, that's one of the issues, I think, actually, that we don't legislate about what happens indoors, because it's people's homes and so forth. So it's a complicated question, but interesting points you make. We should move on now, please, to Richard Daniels from the Department for Education. Richard's been a great supporter of our work in various areas, and it's a pleasure to have him on here. So Richard, it's over to you. Thank you. And I can't hear you, Richard, if you're speaking. Richard, you might be on mute. Richard, are you on mute? Yes, you are. Hold on, I'll unmute you. Okay, Richard, can you
hear me?
Yeah, now I can. Yep.
Can you see the presentation? I tried to share it.
Yes, we've got that. Yep, we're all good.
So what I was going to do is just take you through a short paper that I've written about in response to what TAPAS is, I think. Just trying to scroll down it. Would it let me? Yes. So I wanted to start by saying what DFE have done. So over the years, we've done quite a bit on air quality and indoor air quality. Starting in about 2014, we started to revise Building Bulletin 101, and we changed its guidance from ventilation to indoor air quality, thermal comfort and ventilation. So it includes minimum ventilation standards and ventilation rates in terms of either in ventilation rate or CO2 levels. It's also got standards on thermal comfort, including a version of the CIBSE overheating risk assessment method based on adaptive thermal comfort, and standards to avoid cold drafts in winter. It also has a lot of work done by PHE, and Sani Dimitropoulou helped us from PHE to assemble the latest 2010 WHO IAQ guidelines, which are embedded together with some Symphony research project work into the guidance. It's also got standards and guidance on source control and local exhaust vent, which is a particular problem in things like woodwork and 3D printing. Another strand of our work, which has been going on for a long time, is the DFE Asbestos Working Group, started about 5 years ago. And this is to make sure that asbestos is managed safely in schools. It was only in 1999 that asbestos was finally banned, chrysotile asbestos that is, in schools. And in 1985, the two more hazardous types of asbestos. So we still have a huge amount of asbestos to manage in the school's estate. DFE and schools' responsibilities lie mostly within the school site boundary. So we're most interested in the links between outdoor, indoor environments and the key measures we can do on the site. We're reviewing our DFE guidance, and this has led to 3 or 4 key things that come out of that. We now think that cross ventilation is so much better for thermal comfort and purge ventilation that we're thinking to specify that in all new schools. Our work with the CIBSE Schools Design Group Overheating Working Group has shown that the current overheating risk criteria we use, using the 2020 Design Summer Year 1 weather file, needs to be updated, and we're now going to revise the output specification, which is our design standards, to the 2050-2080 weather files, which is the 2 degrees and 4 degrees C uplift projections, UK SIP projections. We're issuing a guide on wall finishes, which includes advice on what paints to use, what adhesives, and what cleaning products, and that's quite important. We've also, with the help of Chris Idon, who's the chair of the Natural Ventilation Group, and Ben Jones from Nottingham University, got an improved discharge coefficient calculator just about to go onto the web in the BB101 tools web page. This allows you to calculate the effective opening area of a window or a ventilator. Current concerns are, from my point of view, is that indoor air quality should be considered holistically, which includes indoor air quality, acoustics, thermal comfort, and visual comfort. There's an approach that sets this out in the BSEN 16151, which I'd recommend to you to have a look at. And there is a place for that to have national standards covering the whole of indoor air quality. For instance, noise pollution and noise ingress should be considered alongside air quality and air pollution. Recent work on circadian rhythms and exposure of animals and children to sunlight has shown that high levels of daylight are needed to ensure healthy eyesight. Chronic myopia is correlated with high levels of indoor activity and a lack of exposure to sunlight. And so I think more literature review and research is needed in that area. There's hardly any research going on in that area. Both indoor environmental quality and outdoor environmental quality needs to be related to children's health and physiological development. An area we need to look at is the adequacy of current ventilation standards for toilets, corridors, and circulation areas in schools. This is also important in hospitals, and the latest RAMP work has shown the cross-infection route of corridors to be very important. Ventilation effectiveness is an area we need to look at, rather than just ventilation rates, and the link to comfort in summertime. Alan Fogarty's done some work comparing the standard effective temperature with normally used operative temperatures and showing the benefits of air movement during the summertime. And we've done a intervention in a school in Kew where we retrofitted ceiling fans, which both improved indoor ventilation effectiveness, i.e. the CO2 level across the space, as well as made the spaces more comfortable because of the air movement. Another thing we need to look at is the accuracy and calibration of CO2 temperature and indoor air quality sensors, because there's a lack of standards in this area. I think COVID-19 has shown the need to purge ventilate classrooms to reduce the risk of infection. And COVID isn't the only viral infection that schools are facing. And I think a look at the different infection routes within school classrooms, it has been done in the past, but needs to be revisited. Finally, the vulnerability of children's respiratory systems has been well evidenced by the RCPCH work. And I think the work of GAP to make this knowledge accessible to children is very important. Finally, I wanted to look at, well, I don't know if it's finally, but I'm running out of time. Lack of clarity in the current IAQ guidelines and standards. There is not a great deal of industry guidance on filtration and types of filter to use, and the different situations and the benefits of different types of filters. I also think that TVOCs, SVOCs, and PMs are catch-alls which aren't related to chemical composition. And there's a slight danger in this. It's particularly shown up in the paint exercise we did, where the aim to reduce TVOC levels treats alcohol the same as any other volatile organic compound, for instance, which is obviously not right. Also, the PM levels don't take account of what the PM is. For instance, are BAPs or PAHs more important than they are thought to be, but because of masking due to NO2 being also present. Some ideas for future work I've included at the end. Probably let you read those for yourself. I think I'm more or less running out of time, but there's some ideas there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard. That's really helpful. And I mean, it's really great that you have this such detailed knowledge of the school environment. It'd be great help to us, I'm sure. I think we should move on, if that's okay, and now go on to Geraint Davies MP, who's the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Air Pollution. It's a great pleasure to have you here on this call, Geraint, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. And Richard, could you stop sharing your screen, please?
Yeah, we'll try and do that.
Thank you.
Are you ready for me?
We are. We're just waiting for Richard to stop sharing his screen. Sorry.
I'm going to have to go and come back in, I think.
Okay.
I think that I've lost.
Yep. Okay. Geraint, we're ready for you now if you want to.
Right. Can you see me clearly? Yeah.
See you clearly, yes.
All right. I'll fire away. Okay, that was great hearing all those presentations. I'm Geraint Davies, chair of the All-Party Group on Air Pollution. So I guess the first point that people have already made is that air pollution is a real problem. There's about 2,000 schools that are exceeding the EU limits at the moment. I know Andrea talked about the legal enforceability of that. I'll come on to that. Now we're about to lose it. There's something like 63,000 people are dying prematurely a year from air pollution. And obviously in the case of children, in particular in so-called clean air zones, they're found to have something like 10% lower lung capacity. Unclean air, in particular diesel pollutions, causing problems with children's anxiety, concentration, depression, so mental health generally, as well as physical health, which tends to be in the lungs, the hearts and the brains of people as they grow older. And globally, we've got something like 7 million deaths. So this is a chronic problem, and taking alongside COVID, we now know that the transmission rates and the death rates are greater with COVID. It's partly because people are already weaker from the air pollution. So it tends to be something like 8% increase in death rate per microgram of PM 2.5 per cubic meter. So therefore the All-Party Group did a sort of report on, practical measures the government could take to reduce this, which would include more people working from home, staggered arrival at workplaces, and that would include schools. So coming on to schools, obviously the first thing to bear in mind is, trying to be safe on your travel to school. Obviously active travel is the best by walking or by cycling. Clearly we'd advise public transport socially distanced with masks at the moment. And then there's the issue of stopping parents idling outside school, leaving their engines on, which is particularly problematic. Danielle and others mentioned the issue of screening, natural screening with hedges and the like. There are local authority issues trying to, not have schools wherever possible away from busy roads, or reduce the amount of traffic outside schools. And then as we move indoors, and Richard's mentioned the issues of basically chemical contaminants, which are either in the cleaning products, they might be actually on people's persons. So if students come into school with scent on or whatever they're wearing, whether they're boys or girls, and that sort of mixes with ozone, you get and indeed these chemicals mix with outside diesel pollution to cause sort of inflammatory problems in people's physical health. So we don't want scents, clearly we want the right cleaning products. Clearly it's important to ventilate classrooms before children arrive, if possible to clean them the night before, not that morning before, in terms of the chemicals floating around that are affecting people. And it's important. I mean, I know Richard gave a very detailed analysis. I mean, most people running schools will want a sort of common sense point of view of what sort of cleaning products are sensible and to help children go out and breathe fresh air. During COVID, of course, so, you know, my view certainly is that wherever possible, classes shouldn't move between classes. Children shouldn't be moving between classrooms. It clearly should be the teachers to avoid transmission. Of course, obviously, this is very debatable what I'm going to say now, but I mean, there is clearly a case for more masks in schools, obviously better ventilation, because transmission is basically through touch and through airborne activity according to time and distance. So if you've got open windows and more space and even masks in classrooms and people wash their hands regularly, they're going to be safer in terms of COVID itself. Moving on to the points that Andrea was making from Client Earth. I mean, obviously Client Earth has been very successful in taking the government to court for breaching EU air quality standards. And the sad fact is the Environment Bill is now moving forward without any binding legal limits in terms of air quality. And one action point from all this in terms of what can people do, one thing that people could do in schools and as individuals is, you know, write letters, write petitions to their MPs saying that they want specific World Health Organization legally enforceable air quality standards imposed immediately. And what I'm actually talking about here, which is one target, but a signpost to the others, is 10 micrograms per cubic meter of PM2.5 by 2030, with a staging post of, say, 12 micrograms per cubic meter by 2025. Now, in fact, what the government are doing is they're saying they'll announce targets in 2022, which is absurdly late, and those targets won't be legally binding, and they will be changeable by the Secretary of State according to what they're achieving, which is completely unacceptable in my view, and we'll be lagging massively behind Europe. And the problem here, if you're an industrialist, my background is in manufacturing as it happens, is that unless you've got a known regulatory framework into which to innovate, you know, you don't know this is the standard of car we need to deliver, we're going to produce it here. So we're in danger of being sort of dumping ground, or the last refuge of diesel cars. I'm pressing for 2030 that all fossil fuel, whether diesel or petrol, new ones should be banned. But obviously the market, like Honda, have already decided they're going to stop producing diesel cars because they can see the future, and the government is lagging behind. On indoor air pollution, that's the second thing about the Environment Bill. People may know the Environment Bill is currently in Parliament. It's about to go to the laws. It'll be finished off in January. This is a window opportunity to change the law for good. So the first thing, as I've already said, is legally binding World Health Organization limits. The second is to include indoor air quality in the bill itself as something that, you know, the government should be monitoring and keeping people safe indoors. The number of chemicals that are arriving in our classrooms and in our home are growing. And we need to protect our children and ourselves. 90% of our time is indoors. So it's important that we do this. And the government's response on this is, oh, well, let's do some more research. Well, I think it's basically the Royal College of Paediatricians and Child Health issued a sort of comprehensive trawl of all the research on indoor air quality in January. We've got enough evidence to say this is a problem. It should be the Environment Bill. The Environment Bill shouldn't just be the outdoor environment. If we spend 90% of our time indoors, then obviously there's a duty to protect us indoors. And going back to children, obviously the primary duty of a parent is to protect their children, but they can't if the air is dirty outside and inside the school. So therefore we rely on the government to do this, and they're demonstrably failing at the moment in the Environment Bill. So the two changes in the Environment Bill, I'd like people from schools and elsewhere to stress, you know, who limits, which are legally enforceable, immediately applied, and secondly, a recognition of a duty to protect us in terms of indoor air quality. I think I'll probably leave it there, probably gone on too long already. I finally say that there's a move in the Environment Bill to try and pass the buck to local authorities. I know Andrew mentioned some good news, but the reality is that Southampton, Leeds and Coventry have just abandoned their attempts to introduce clean air zones because they're desperately short of money because of the cuts. And now they've got new responsibilities under COVID. Local authorities, what's more, cannot determine, big roads just outside the local authorities. They can't determine the fiscal strategy for charging diesel duty and all the rest of it. The government needs to be held to account for our children's health, and we need to hold their feet to the fire. So I would urge everybody to write to their MPs and to network up. And the more I can network through the all-party group to schools through you, the better. We really do need to be pushing at this door now, between now and January, because this is a window of opportunity to save lives. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I mean, one of the things that we're concerned about, I think, is how we can influence policy, how we can bring the results of this network and so forth into the policy arena. And I'd be interested just to get a quick take from you on that.
Yeah, well, I'd like to answer that, because I think people think, I mean, obviously sort of academically sound and, submissions to the Parliament, all this sort of stuff's all very good. But what you really want to do is to frighten the hell out of individual MPs. And let's face it, the reality is that a lot of, I'm being slightly party political here, but a lot of these sort of red wall that fell down, a lot of Conservatives arrived, traditional Labour seats. So if you put yourself in the position of those MPs, Conservative MPs, they're thinking, oh crikey, how long is my career? I'm about to lose my seat. Well, that's what we want them to think. You should be writing letters saying, I demand these assurances in the Environment Bill. And if loads of pupils and doctors and other people write to a local MP, I'm a local MP, if loads of people write to me, I'm take it very seriously. So the best way is to have a whole groundswell of letter writing from schools, in particular in marginal seats, because it's a 80 Conservative majority, government. The Labour Party or any other party isn't going to overturn a vote. The only way we're going to overturn votes is if people who are on the Conservative side also vote for changes in the Environment Bill. And the way to get them to do that is through their own self-preservation. If they think everybody's jumping up and down outside their, their office surgery or online or whatever, writing them emails, writing them letters, and they say, we'll be watching how you're voting on this and supporting these amendments, they will act.
Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to the final presentation of this session, which is from Alan Fogarty, again from Cundall and Gen Zero. So Alan, when you're ready, would you like to take over?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, can you see my screen?
I can, actually, yes.
Very good. Okay, good, worked. Okay, so the Gen Zero project, we're developing two prototype schools for the Department for Education. It's very early stages at this point in time. But all the kind of issues that Richard raised in relation to BB 101, we're going to have to integrate within the actual design itself. I said two prototypes, one's for a city centre environment, which is harsh acoustic, potentially air quality issues, and one more kind of greenfield site type arrangement. The objective is zero carbon schools. So what is a zero carbon school like, and how well will it perform both in terms of environmental considerations as well as the actual energy use itself. We're using the UK GBC definition of net zero carbon, so we're looking at both operational and embodied. And it's zero carbon, but without compromising the environmental quality, thermal comfort, etc., for the occupants themselves. And it also needs to be future-proof because the buildings are going to last 60 years. So we're looking at impacts of future weather files and increased rainfall. Biodiversity is important, so looking at the landscaping and how you can bring the landscaping right up to the building and how that impacts then on the overall environment of the space. And equally, the link with nature increases the biophilia within the building itself. And then standardization using modern methods of construction, again, reducing waste and cost. And we're looking at, we went through a research phase in the last few months and just looking at what the design standards are and what kind of things will really impact on these schools. And the very first thing was, are we using the right standards for comfort? Currently, the standards are in the output specification are based on a relaxed version of TM52, and that's a city guide for thermal comfort. And we concluded that if we're looking for a more rigorous comfort standard by looking at future weather files, then we should actually go back to the more rigorous TM52. So that was the first thing. So we've analysed this for current weather files right through to 2 and 4 degree 2080 weather files. We looked at orientation because the usual consideration is that a southerly orientation is best, but in reality, the sun is only on the east facade for a couple of hours in the morning time when the building's occupied, and equally in the evening time, while it's on the southern facade for about 6 hours during the day. And what our analysis showed, in relation to the degree of compliance, the east facade is able to provide the same levels of comfort as the north facade. So the east facade has less exposure, but it also has cooler temperatures, etc. So it's easier to naturally ventilate an eastern facade compared to a southern facade, which was interesting. Richard mentioned cross ventilation, and we looked at the impact cross ventilation has then on occupant comfort in spaces. And what it does is it doubles the air velocity within the classroom, and higher air velocities have a very significant impact on perceived temperatures. So when you get up to 0.5, 0.6, 0.7 meters a second, you can have perceived reductions in temperature of about 2 degrees. So the chart here is showing single-sided versus cross-ventilation. Cross-ventilation being in the blue, it shows that single-sided just isn't providing the levels of comfort at all in comparison. And when you look at the future weather files, even cross-ventilation is not able to provide the comfort levels. So we're looking at what interventions we need to make in the future. Can we enhance cross-ventilation to make it better, or will we have to go to a more mechanical system? One of the things we've looked at is the impact of landscaping on the air temperatures around the building. And we've seen that by introducing landscaping, potentially with water features or irrigation, that you can get up to 2.5, 3 degrees reduction in temperature onto the actual facades themselves. So that could be a very significant benefit to the schools themselves. Getting air into classrooms in winter in sufficient volume to provide effective ventilation is key, but how do you do that without causing drafts along the perimeter? So on the right-hand side, it shows the air coming in effectively because it's cold, the wind is cold, it drops and accelerates down, causing discomfort for the occupants along the perimeter. In this image on the left, we've introduced a light shelf, which holds the air up and keeps it away from the window, which gives us a chance to actually mix with the heat in the classroom, because there's a lot of heat in the classroom, and it needs cooling for most of the time. So the net result then is that the air, as it enters the occupant zone, is comfortable. So we can use natural ventilation for much longer without resorting to mechanical ventilation and more heating and more energy. An alternative to this would be looking at ceiling fans. Ceiling fans are great in terms of increasing air velocities in summer, but you could have it that you are using it to mix the air as it comes into the classroom in wintertime. We've compared the mechanical systems with natural vent. The middle one there is a central air handling unit, and the grey bar is the fan energy associated with it, and we can see that's quite significant. If you use natural ventilation alone, then it's lower as a solution, but you can see the blue there is actually the heat that's going into the space, and as there's no recovery, we need quite a lot of it. And if you have localized systems in the classrooms themselves, then you can reduce the fan energy because you're not trying to push the air right around the building. So that makes a big difference in the overall energy of the school. And equally, comparing thermal mass with a lighter weight construction. So this is kind of concrete versus timber, and it certainly shows that the thermal mass in light blue there is significantly better, providing thermal comfort compared to the lighter weight construction. So again, that needs to be factored in relation to comfort versus energy, because you've got embodied energy associated with the concrete. Next steps, well, we're looking at a range of things that might impact on the building. So IT loads within the spaces, catering loads. Can you take any of these waste heats and reuse them? So waste from servers, catering, extract systems, and can you use that heat then to boost the performance of heat pumps? And of course, then embodied energy needs to be factored in with all this, which is all very early stages. And another idea is, if you take the heat from the classrooms, which effectively means cooling it, could you do something with that? So one of the ideas would be that you would take the heat from the classrooms, you'd push it into a thermal store, which then could be used to feed into a district system, feeding into local residential, because schools and residential very frequently go together. So very early stages in the project, lots to look at, lots to do, and the environmental quality, air quality will all be part of that process. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan. That was interesting, and I just wonder if anyone has a question for Alan. There's a comment in the chat from Owen saying it would be great to align your Gen Zero work with the DFE climate change adaptation study. So, good. All right, thank you. Well, I think that does bring to an end the contributions from the stakeholders, and I really appreciate everyone's contributions this afternoon. It's been very interesting, and I already had quite a lot of feedback about the kinds of interactions that you would like to see. We're going to now take a break until 2:20, so just over 20 minutes, and then come back to have a discussion about how we'll work together, the academic team and the stakeholders in the project. So
may I ask something, yes, Paul?
Please. Yeah.
And just to say that there will be an all-party group meeting on the 2nd of November with global action about schools. So if I send you the information, maybe you could distribute it so people can participate if they want to. Is that okay?
That would be great. If you could send it to Sophie, that would be very helpful. We would be happy to do that. Absolutely. Yep. So we'll take a break. If I will stay on the line, and if anyone has questions for any of us, please feel free to we can have a discussion, or we can just be silent now until 2:20. Okay. So thank you all.
Yeah, if I may, Paul, again, I'm going to have to go because I've got surgery and other stuff. But I think someone sent me a message saying if I could get the information on some of the schools in particular that are, in areas which are below legal standards.
Yes.
I mean, this is about getting messages out to schools and trying to send them back in a sort of coherent way. Yes. So I'm happy to liaise with you, and I'm trying to liaise with doctors, organizations and others. It's just a matter of creating a lot of noise really about these asks for the Environment Bill. So I don't want to sort of bang on about it, but we have got this sort of window of opportunity to do something. So
sure.
Thanks so much for letting me speak, and
that's been very interesting actually.
Work together in the future.
Yeah, it's good to make contact with your committee. I appreciate that. So thank you.
Well, have a great day. Thank you so much. I must go now, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Okay. Bye now.
Hi, Paul. Hi. Hi, my name is Zahir. I think you know me. I work at Cranfield University, and I'm also network manager with BioAirNet. Yep. So previously, sort of loads of work. So my background is looking at mainly from sort of a PM and aerosols and indoor air quality and outdoor. So it was quite interesting, and I did spend around 4 or 5 years. One of the colleague of mine, I worked, Matteo. I think he's in your team. I've seen him today. He's in Surrey now. Yes. So he was with me in UCL. So we're looking at airborne disease transmission there in UCL. So I think the question that I was, because I think it's a very interesting topic, and what I gather, like in your first focus group in understanding the problems. So I could see like, I think it's a reasonable approach to go back to the existing state of art. What do we know? But because I think it's such a sort of, in terms of the problems, or let's say the contaminant we are facing. So are you taking a sort of a look holistically and all the sort of, let's say, environmental health or air health issues in the schools, or you are sort of restricting yourself to specific, because when you look at air health and environmental health, it broadly falls into the 4 sort of categories, like physical, chemical, biological, and to a certain extent ergonomic hazards as well, that then relates to all the 3 others. So what is sort of your sort of approach, and when you look at the problem?
I think we're looking at the sort of airborne side of things, basically. So airborne pollutants, particulate material, of course, which are sort of partly airborne and partly settle and deposit. So they're included. I think, but I think, I mean, the focus really is on air quality, I would say, rather than sort of total environmental health. And there's been some discussion about whether we include noise, for example, as in this kind of area. And I think at the moment, it's not clear to me whether or not that falls within our remit. I think as the project was initially written, it did not particularly feature, but again, these things evolve, and if it turns out that that's an important ingredient that we just can't ignore, I guess we'd have to think about how we take that on board as one example. So
it means like definitely you're looking into the physical and the sort of biological aspects, including the chemical as well, you know. So you're looking at chemical pollutants as well as the biological pollutants as well.
Yes, well, I would say the emphasis was really very much on chemical, actually. And that's why we're very pleased to have Nick Carslaw on board, because she's an authority on that area. I mean, but of course, since this is all was proposed, and which is now, of course, ages ago, you know, COVID has happened, and so suddenly the thought about airborne transmission of disease has come up. So that brings in the biological side of things, I think, quite clearly, and I mean, there are clearly benefits even beyond COVID if we talk about those kinds of things. As you know, school kids are always transmitting something between each other and then bringing it home to their parents and so on. So I think, you know, that if we can cover that as well, that would be. No,
I think like there is no sort of other 2 sort of opinions. For years, I think people were sort of talking about this, like if you improve, let's say, the air health within any built environment, it goes beyond sort of that specific need. Right. You know, it's because I think there is quite a lot of stress in today's presentation as well about ventilation or improving sort of, let's say, the dilution for sort of reducing the contamination in a space. So once we have those sort of system in place, let's say based on the user need or in the context of a specific environment, if a system is in place, then it is beyond, I think it overall improves, I think, because most of that, at the moment, the regulation, the stress is on the thermal comfort. You know, most of the rules were always like document F, document L. They were always based on thermal comfort, not on air hygiene or indoor air quality. I think now probably is the first time that NERC are at sort of at the top level of research councils, they are taking indoor air quality seriously on the board. Previously, it was always enveloped somewhere in ambient air. So, I mean, I think these are quite good steps, and I think we do have a reasonable evidence base in terms of monitoring and in terms of what is there. I think I've seen someone has already mentioned about a Symphony project. I know your Magic project as well, that is linking like indoor air quality with more sort of energy efficiency as well.
Yes.
So I think I'm quite happy. And I think looking at all the 6 networks that are funded, almost everyone has at least one agenda in common, and that is to improve indoor air quality. And always one thing turns up, the vulnerable groups and the ventilation. So everyone is, I think, focusing on those things.
Well, I mean, that was part of the call, of course, to focus on vulnerable groups. So and it was about air pollution at the indoor-outdoor interface. So I think that's absolutely the case. So it's not surprising, I would say, that that's been the focus. I think what's interesting is, and I think quite pertinent at the moment, is that the concern is that in wintertime conditions, that ventilation will be reduced in order to maintain thermal comfort. And that, of course, has impacts on indoor air quality. And so there is a trade-off here, I think, Anna. And you're right. I think most of the work that we've done on ventilation up until recently has been very much about, let's make sure that we use as little energy as possible to either stay warm or keep cool. And that's all about, as far as I can see, about, exchange between inside and outside in some global sense, so how much heat do you lose, or how much do you need to remove in the summer, or whatever it is. Whereas if you talk about pollution and talk about exposure, you're actually much more concerned about what happens within a building itself. I mean, the exchange matters, of course, but in addition to that, your exposure changes if the ventilation flow patterns are different.
Yes.
For example.
Yeah, I think
whereas if you're just concerned with energy, it doesn't matter so much what happens indoors. This raises a whole lot of other issues, I think, which are interesting. And so to give you a specific example, all the models I've seen of buildings and ventilation imagine that if there are any people inside, they never move around.
Yes.
And we know for sure that when people move around, they stir up things. For example, they carry quite significant weights. Probably the velocity in their wake is greater than anything else in the room. And so, understanding exposure, you have to understand what the influence of that is, for example. And so I think, there's all of that.
I think you really put it in a well, because my sort of own observation is this, that it's not the exchange, it's the effectiveness. And quite often, I think the way our sort of over the years, due to the sort of, especially in a sort of, let's say, the public buildings, for example, in sort of offices like in London, because I did work for years, some sort of a TB transmission, like in a sort of within sort of a occupational built environment. And when you look there was a big drive to have an open plan offices. So at the design stage, as you said, like mathematical model will say, okay, so much air change and per floor area per person is okay. But when it went to the usage of this user sort of stage, they will change that, desk orientation. They might put another wall in between. And I have seen literally some sort of cases where there was an only exhaust left in one partition, and sort of a inlet was left in another partition. So I think it's fair to say it's the effectiveness, basically, that we need to stress, that how effective is ventilation within a space, relative to sort of emission sources in that space. So I think you are 100% right on that one. Okay, yeah, it was good. I think I enjoyed all of the session. It was very well planned, and I just go and quickly grab a cup of tea and come back.
Yes, Owen, and yes, Owen, you can interrupt.
You're obviously invited to grab a cup of tea yourself, Paul.
Yeah, I'm going to go and have a drink in a minute. That's all right.
I was just wondering, we've had lots of talks, and all of them have been really interesting. One of the things, as you know, I'm keen on is not being over ambitious. I'm aware that TAPAS is a network rather than a research fund. It's not necessarily funded research, it's a funded network.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of the talks this morning seemed to be about, we're going to do this, we're going to measure this. Have you measured something else? Have you monitored something else? And I wonder whether it feels to me as though the actual monitoring is all actually outside the scope of TAPAS. What TAPAS is about, and do correct me if I'm wrong, is actually putting the modeling people together with the communication people, or the computational modeling in line with the monitoring people, rather than actually funding the work itself. Or am I off the mark there?
No, that's exactly right. We have a little bit of money for some seed projects, but it's really relatively small. And the idea is, this is not a research project. You're quite right. It is a network, and it's sort of something that is different from, well, speaking personally, things I've done before. So I have to figure out kind of how we're actually going to do this and make it useful. It's building. I mean, my interpretation of this is that there are sort of two communities in the UK: people who work on outdoor air pollution and people who work on indoor air pollution, and they're quite different communities in many respects. And so one of the goals in all of this, I think, is to bring those communities together, to somehow figure out how we speak a common language, how we understand each other's perspectives, and develop a more holistic view of the whole issue, is what I think is about. And using, and in our case, using schools and kids as an example, rather than particularly, well, yeah, of course, we're concerned with problems in schools, but I mean, it's sort of an exemplar of a way of bringing these communities together around some issue and trying to provide sort of holistic message at the end. Yeah, and one of the things that will happen is that there is already a call out from NERC for a next round of clean air proposals, which will start in a year's time, if whichever ones are funded. And so that will, and they will be really research projects. So the question will be slightly, how do we as a network sort of connect with whatever happens next? You know, we'll only be a year down our 3-year path, and there'll be a whole bunch of new things happening that we'll want to sort of kind of involve with. Yeah,
which is great. I just think it might be worth emphasizing the network nature of TAPAS.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Paul, you're kind of pushing against an open door, and from my experience of having to do quite a similar thing with CIBSE, which is on a much smaller scale, through just kind of random encounters with people that are members of IAQM, we've managed to sort of get those two groups in a room together and started to find where those gaps in knowledge between the two exist, and a lot of it's communication. Like we're all really talking about the same thing. It's just that a lot of it's the language of outdoor air quality, and the point at which they're involved is very much to do with chemistry and planning policy, and the language of the people that are designing indoor spaces is very much about mechanical ventilation or natural ventilation, and to some extent measuring what's going on indoors. But the two groups are desperate to talk to each other because they butt up against each other, and up until now they've kind of ignored each other. So it's like it's handed over at planning. Here's the end of the outdoor bit. Now onto the indoor bit, and half the time the indoor guys don't look at the outdoor guys bit anyway.
Can I just say that that's mostly true, but not completely true? So we've got a big European network, Paul's part of it as well, where we are definitely working together, indoor and outdoor air quality people. I'm also involved in a really large American program, $50 million program over 10 years. And the reason that that's been so successful is that the program director had the foresight to convince lots of outdoor air people to bring their really comprehensive, expensive, state-of-the-art equipment indoors. So we had an amazing field campaign in Texas in 2018, where there was a test house with, I think it was $4.5 million worth of equipment, 65 scientists in this, not particularly large house. And, everything under the sun was measured just like you would for an outdoor field campaign. And I think what we're learning from that is amazing, and that really is because we got outdoor and indoor people to talk together. So I think it is happening compared to 5 years ago. It's definitely getting better.
Yeah, I should have clarified. I'm really talking about the delivery of a new building, for example, where it really isn't that joined up. I mean, it's great to hear that research is. I mean, this group is kind of a testament to the people that want to join in with that. So it's great to hear that it's happening.
I think it's happening more elsewhere, though. Maybe like so many things with the UK at the moment, we're behind. We're behind the Europeans. We're behind the Americans. But I think there's lots of room to improve that, definitely.
Well, it'd be good to hear more about the American campaign, actually, and other things.
If that linking up the indoor and the outdoor groups, if you like, or camps, is a key focus of TAPAS. I'm not sure that came across to me this morning. I was looking back at the project structure slide, which I thought was nice and had the 4 streams, of which I obviously was a big fan of the focus area 4 on dissemination. Yeah. But I wouldn't have pulled out that we were trying to draw together indoor and outdoor specialists from that. Maybe that's something we can, yeah, add a bit of a graphic on or something.
Okay, that's helpful.
And this is Sophie as well. I think it's as much about not just linking up indoor and outdoor, but linking up the research community to the people that are actually doing the work in the, you know, the kind of practical world outside. So filling research gaps that they have, and also giving them the resources they need to kind of do the campaigning that changes, you know, changes the picture. So to me, it's kind of making that link that's important as part of the network. And that comes down a lot to the communications and dissemination part of it.
Yeah.
Hey Ed, if you're still on there, you know your indoor air quality sensors. I was asked the other day whether someone could buy, would I recommend an IAQ sensor that was sort of less than 50 quid? And I couldn't really come up with one. You know, is that a thing, or is the price still 200 quid rather than 50 quid for anything?
Yeah, not 50 quid. I don't think I've seen one. Well, maybe coming out of China, you might get some. You might, I mean, some of the components you can get reasonable readings with a decent electronic engineer sort of playing around with it. You can get decent readings out of like a bare bones sensor plus whatever you need to get it to read for less than 50 quid. But as a finished product, no, not really.
Yeah, I can't remember who was leading that bit on the Magic project. Developed their own air quality sensors, which were made by cheap labor, aka PhD students, I think.
Yeah. I feel like it might have been Ben Jones.
But I think they did manage to do that for a pretty basic, by buying components, as you say, and putting them together in a very slightly, hashed enclosure. That they did it for a bargain rate.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what we did, and we've got it to the point where we have a manufacturable device with sort of bills of quantity and stuff that you can send to a factory and get it made. But it's we've not really done anything with it because we didn't really want to go into. Effectively, we'd be competing with companies that want to do that as a service rather than us as consultants. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But we do have prototypes if somebody wants to manufacture them.
I think Shuei built that quite cheaply, didn't he? On Magic.
Say that again, Sophie. Sorry.
I think Shuei built our sensors quite cheaply on Magic. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. That's why I was wondering whether they came in at the sort of sub 100 quid mark.
They're about £100, I think, for what they measured, which was NO2, CO2, temperature, relative humidity.
Is that the ones that Rod Jones uses?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they're about 100 quid, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's roughly what ours came out, and ours were VOCs, TVOCs, particulate, CO2, temperature, humidity. Yeah, that was it.
Was there any interest in commercializing those from the Magic project, Paul? I'm just interested. Ed said there that they've got a kind of bill of materials and everything, and you seem to have similar. Universities are always looking for spin-outs.
Well, we haven't done that, but I think there's interest in doing something along those lines. Again, perhaps focusing more on CO2 actually at the moment because of COVID.
It's quite a crowded market. That's one thing I'd say. I think if you were to have done it in 2014, 15, it would have been easier, been ahead of the curve. I think now there's hundreds of manufacturers knocking out cheap air sensors.
Yeah,
mixed quality.
We just had a conversation where we said you can't buy a decent one for less than a couple hundred quid.
I say cheap, 200 quid. The issue is the actual cost to have it manufactured is just the cost of the parts, even at scale, is probably £100 for something that's measuring multiple things.
Yeah, okay.
As soon as you add shipping and maintenance and the software and everything else that you need to actually start collecting data and streaming it somewhere, then it quickly adds up to close to that, and the profit margins aren't huge.
Yeah.
Ed, can I ask, in the work that you've been doing at CIBSE, to what extent is that focused on kind of influencing policy, and what have you found the best ways to kind of to do that? I guess we still have time. I'm just interested to know, or maybe another time, just to learn a bit about your experience with that, because that's going to be a big part of what we're going to be trying to do with this. So it would be great to kind of pick your brains at some point, I think, about how that has worked for you.
Yeah, can do separately.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we're sort of coming to the next phase now, so we should move on, I think. Thanks for chatting. It's been good. And I hope those of you who've had a chance to have, if you wanted a cup of tea or whatever it is, it's a bit early for cups of tea in the canonical English thing of 4 o'clock, but anyway. But we now go into the last session, and I will just remind you what we're going to do. If I can share my screen. Well, actually, I'll just tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to just talk for a little bit about, give a brief presentation about working with our partners, and then we're going to go into a breakout discussion for about 20 minutes, and then there'll be a brief wrap up by me at the end. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So this last part really is to try and optimize how we can work together to do the things we've been chatting about, in some sense, bringing together the indoor and outdoor communities, air pollution communities, and working with our stakeholders to produce output that is useful. I think that's really important, and rather than just academic things. And we're very fortunate at the beginning of writing the proposal to have a significant number of important organizations associated with us. And here are their logos. And you've heard from some of them already today. And it's very exciting, I think, for us to again work with with all of you. Some of you I've worked with through the Magic Project, and others are new to us, and that's really exciting. And as I said earlier, this is an open network, so I hope that we'll add logos to this as we go through the period of the project, and so forth. So what we want to do is, we think, is identify gaps in knowledge through you, and provide scientific evidence to support outreach. And so one of the things we kind of want to know is what evidence in your particular areas, what are you missing? What could we provide? What interactions or bringing together different groups of people would be useful to you? And also, we would like to know what you're doing, so that we build on that and don't try and reinvent the wheel. And this was partly what was presented today. We heard from a group of people, a group of organizations, saying what they were doing, and also giving some suggestions about the things that they would like. And this is something that we'd like to take forward in conversation over the next period. It's trying to get to know each other, and try and figure out how we can, what our synergies are, and how we can work well together. And we also want to know how you can help us. So to understand the kind of situations that we're dealing with in the education system, let us know if you have information that would be relevant to us that we could share. And as I said, we want to, again, and this is what I was saying during the break, but I think one of the issues that have changed in the building ventilation business have moved away from just looking at energy efficiency, which was a big focus, I think, partly as a result of the energy crisis in 1973, and then the concerns about climate change, the emission of greenhouse gases from the built environment, energy use. It was very much, as I said before, about the kind of essentially what goes in and out of a building, how much heat is lost when you ventilate, or how much heat can you remove in the summer by ventilation, how much energy do you need to do that, and trying to make those buildings as energy efficient as possible. And under those circumstances, you don't really worry too much about what goes on inside the building. You're really concerned with the kind of ventilation rate, rather than, as another way of saying it, the ventilation effectiveness. And if you're concerned about pollution, particularly airborne pollution, then of course it's what you breathe in. And with the COVID pandemic, we're not just now, I think, concerned with gaseous and particulate pollution, but also those that carry airborne disease. So things that carry virus particles, for example. And so again, we would like from those of you working in this area, if you have information that would be useful to share, that would be very helpful. So this is a different lens, I think, to look at the whole building airflow issues and how air pollution moves around and what personal exposure is. It's quite different. You need to know what's happening inside a space, where the air is moving internally, rather than just how much comes in and how much goes out. And that lens, I think, is something that we will explore during the course of this project. And what are the critical issues that need to be resolved in that context. So these are the sort of options that we have working together. We are planning to have these meetings, which involve all our partners and others that join the network in the future. We're planning to have a meeting every 6 months on that, and we will also set up specific topic workshops. And of course, we would like you to be engaged in those if that suits you. As I said, the focus groups meet on a kind of regular basis, probably about monthly, and you're very welcome to join those, one or more, and you can do it for a while and move in and out. I think we don't want to be prescriptive here at all. If there are specific projects, and as I said, we do have a little bit of seed money to support specific research projects, then you could work with us on those. Or you could work closely with a specific member of the academic team. Maybe a research idea will crop up as a result of our conversations, and you might want to work together to submit something for funding, for example. Or, as I said, something different, or a combination of the above. So these are what we can think of at the moment, but there may be other things that you would find more useful. I suppose we are going to transition from meeting electronically to eventually meeting personally again at some point, I hope. And maybe that will, what works well in one context might work differently in another, and we might change things as we go along. And certainly this is meant to be a joint discussion, so it's not meant to be any one group telling the others what to do. We really want to try and what's the jargon, co-design the way we operate to optimize things as much as possible. So what we're going to do now is to break out into a series of breakout rooms. We currently have, I can't see it now. Well, I'll tell you in a minute how many people in each breakout room. When you do get into a breakout room, would you please nominate someone to keep a record of the discussion? At the moment, we have these 3 questions that we would like your thoughts about. One is on our goals. Are we missing anything? Do you think that some of them are irrelevant? We'd like to know about, as I've just been saying, how we can best engage with our partners to optimize our impact. And also, are there any other key stakeholders that we should be encouraging to join or talking to? So these are the three things that we'd like you to talk about. But of course, if there are other things come up, please don't hesitate to include those. And I think it won't be time at the end of this to go over all of the outcomes from the breakout groups. So what we suggest is that you send your report to Sophie at her email address written at the bottom here. And we will then circulate a summary of those along with the minutes of this meeting at a later date. Okay. So, and as I said, we have a website. Well, that's the web address. It's very much in its early stages, but has some essential information, and we will contribute to that and add things to it as time goes on. And we have a Twitter feed, so please tweet and tell other people all about us. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And we have 48 participants. So I'm going to break us up into, let me think, 9 groups, 47 participants. I'm going to break us up into 9 breakout groups. That's about 5 people each. I hope that's enough to have a conversation, but not too many that people can't say something. And as I said, nominate a spokesperson and take some notes, please. Yeah. So I will do that. You will be assigned randomly. So that's good, I think. So mix with other people, and then we'll come back together in about 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to try and do this now. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to open all the rooms. So I hope you now have to join your room, I believe. For those of you who haven't joined, you have to join your group. Just waiting for all the rooms to close. Okay. All right. So, well, welcome back, everybody. I hope that was a useful time and useful discussion. I don't think there's much more for me to say at this point, just other than to wrap up the meeting. I guess two things to say. One is, of course, please, I hope that you did take some notes about your discussion over the last 20 minutes or so, and please send them to Sophie. If anybody, Sophie, would you want to just put your email address in the chat just in case anybody doesn't have? I can't imagine that's the case, but anyway. So please do that. And as I said, we will circulate some minutes of this meeting and summarize the discussions. And I think all it remains for me to say is just thank you so much, all of you, for attending today. It's been a very interesting meeting. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure that that we will take this forward together. I look forward to further interactions. If there's any points that come to your mind, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Sophie and me about things and how we can take things forward. And we will look forward, we'll be in contact with other events as time goes on. So thank you all for your patience and perseverance today, and I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll be in touch again soon. Okay. All right. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, Paul. That's very good.
Thanks, Ron. Take care, everyone. Bye now.